Hi. So I had this idea. I know it's 3 a.m. Sorry. Had this idea just going through my whole topster. Because I posted on Twitter. It's like my 7th or 8th topster or something. This one's for music nerds. And this is another stream that's kind of for just putting something up there. Because I don't want to have like an hour and a half thing on my computer when I can just do this. But yeah, here's my topster. It's my topster. It's cool. We're just gonna go through it all. So I have it open in paint.net here. So I will first go through, I'm sure eventually my topster will, I think this is 100. I'm sure it will eventually be all 9s, but at this point, there is, dividing line here. So these are everything below this line, sort of like that, and then like, and then like that, and I assume you can see my cursor. Like everything here to the left to here. These are all the very highest bits of my 8s. They might eventually cross over into being 9s. Up here, through these are every single one of my 9 out of 10 albums and EPs. And it becomes 10s right here. So that's 10 out of 10 albums above this point. So you're going to start at the bottom. Hikaru no Itaguchi, Untitled. It's a very short EP. I think it's a fair spot for the bottom one because it's just one specific mood. It is literally just sort of new agey piano playing and just two blaring constant noise, and that is it. But it is weirdly effective. Like it has been on my charts before. I think it used to be a 9. It's just very effective. Like it's not by a Japanese artist, but it's kind of like edgy. But it works. It works. I'm going to be warning you, I have very weird taste for a GD player. Most of this is experimental music. We're going to be just going through that. Also, I listen to a fair amount of electroacoustic music and a fair amount of metal music, and there is very little of that on here, so yeah. So that's Hikaru no Itaguchi. There is a metal thing, very iconic, Earth 2, special low frequency edition by Earth. Pretty much the thing that started the drone metal thing. Starts off, I think it's the thing that made me click, okay, I actually do like doom metal. Because the first track on there is pretty much just a normal doom metal track, but then the second track is slower, and then the third track is slow, basically to the point of being like ambient. It's not quite a 9. I don't know if it's ever been one, but it is powerful. It's definitely 9s for a lot of people. It's very important. Also, it was released on the same label as Nirvana for some reason. Around the same time as Nirvana. Probably some Nirvana fans heard this. Which is very weird to think about. I guess it's just because they're another Seattle band. This is Death Dynamic Shroud. Mega Tower Derelict. I can't remember what the Japanese translates to. Derelict Mega Tower, I think it is. It's just 4 hours of like cassette hist, slightly edited video game music, and that is literally all it is. It's a vaporwave group. They have some other stuff like this, but this one's definitely their most powerful. It's kind of shockingly consistent for being like 4 hours long. Yeah. First, very many Autechre albums. I have like 7 Autechre albums on here. This is LB5. The track Ray, very good. Under Boak. I don't like the opener. Is the opener 777? I can't remember, but it's just Fleur from XI, but worse to me. So I don't care about it that much. But the rest is pretty good. People love Ray. Oh, full 4 rap 7. Actually, do have a. I hope that didn't. Show my desktop. Well, I don't know. I'm gonna check my. Yeah, I shouldn't have showed my desktop. Favorite songs. Gonna check that real quick. For any LP5 tracks I'm missing. I mean, it's just full rap 7 and Ray, mostly. Those are my favorites in Underboak. All very good. I guess in their discography, it's probably like the most industrially influenced one. Definitely the second most behind Chiastic, Music Concrete influenced one. It's definitely the first one where you hear, okay, this is a sign of how crazy this band's gonna get. Because it's where they really start pulling up the abstraction. On the complete other side, this is Raid, The Lava's Volcano, which is this bizarre outsider hip-hop album. It sounds like it was made in GarageBand, but it's 90 minutes long. There's very weird tracks. There's a track on there which is 90% or 80% just someone else's track entirely. And then the guy himself, he's it's kind of hard to talk about because this isn't usually a thing I'm drawn to. People who are clearly mentally not okay, but he was a cocaine dealer, and he was sort of famous for this weird event he had where he called a bomb squad to a place, and then just when there was no bomb, and then just rapped to them for 3 hours, and we presumed that what he sounded like there was what he sounds like here. He has videos on his YouTube that are 20 minutes. He has a couple tracks that are 20 minutes of him just doing his bizarre rap style. It's bizarre. It's unexplainable. It's genuinely good. He also has a movie called Still Flowing the Movie. I think that's what it's called. Which has a couple tracks from here. Notable tracks here are the opener's very exhausting. There's Fresh da Zapanimem. There's something which is people's favorite. If you like weird outsider music, this is my favorite outsider album. Unless you count Bish Bosh, which I don't think counts. It's very good. But only if you have very weird tastes. It is a hard thing to get into if you don't already like just weird sounding amateur music. And I think it just does that best. And I like the cover too. You can't see it that it's a little pixelated here because my topster, but it's a cool cover as well. Here's Prurient's Rainbow Mirror. Probably my favorite straight up dark ambient album. It came out around the time I was getting into music, just before. I've tried other Prurient. Frozen Niagara Falls just makes me sad. The lyrics are just intense. I heard... what is it? I can't remember the title. But I heard one of the early Harsh Noise ones, and it was kind of exhausting. But this one, just as a whole, brilliant textures. I'd probably put it under... It's quite adjacent to... It's sort of very stretched out industrial landscapes with synths and really cool textures. Not as many people like this as I think they would, but this is my favorite straight up dark ambient album. So, just in the genre, I'm a little inconsistent with, but yeah. Here's Gara Gara Gaga Instruments Disorder. There's a bit of noise on here, but this is definitely another one. I don't really know how accessible Garo Gary is because like they're very apparent in what they do. Like what they do is very obvious. They are just push punk noise metal, I guess, just to an absolute extreme, just mind melting, screaming, immature. And Instruments Disorder is. I haven't heard many of their stuff before it, but I really like Instruments Disorder. Here's Fuck Buttons Slow Focus. Fuck Buttons is. We have another thing from them way up at the top. This is my second favorite from. Well, third favorite. Third favorite. Fourth favorite. Because I think. Did I put. I probably should have put Dumb Flesh, Blank Mass on here. It's hard to tell. But the closure on this is my favorite track from Benjamin John Power, who is half of the group and is known as Blank Mass. Hidden Excess. Very, very good track. And the rest is alright. It's mostly that track that gets it up this high. Just absolutely beautiful. Here is Hickey P Utopia, one of the newer things here. I was playing a fan game. I had heard this before, but I was playing a fan game called 8 Possible. I Want to Be the Guy fan game. And it uses a couple Hickey P songs in the sort of weird stages. This is a Vocaloid album, but it's just this absolutely clusterfuck, ridiculous, dense nonsense with sort of a mild Denpa influence, but it is chaotic, it is just insanity. It's probably more if you like experimental sound collage noise music than if you like Vocaloid music, because it is just so abrasive. There's even a bit of sort of like a metal vibe to it. There's definitely like a Denpa vibe to it. It's very good. It's probably going to rise up more, because I don't fully get it. There's just so much going on. Here's the Goslings' Grandeur of Hair. Another doom metal album. Just very, very heavy. The first one on here you'll see me listening to because it is just absolutely, like, it just messes with my brain. I have things, as of late, as of past couple years, I've had it before, but I have dissociation problems, sort of the most extreme that my autism has, and for dissociating, there ain't much better than Grandeur of Hair. It is really, really heavy, but it still has these sort of beautiful, ethereal female vocals. I don't know who the vocalist is in Goslings, I forget, but yeah. First couple tracks, Onakar and Croton, very, very good. But very, very, very heavy. Probably the heaviest album on this entire list, which is saying something because there's like straight up noise stuff on here. Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that if that actually is, because this might be the heaviest. Another Autechre, EP7. Yes, I prefer EP7 to LP5. It has Massive 6.1, which is one of my favorite tracks from them. My favorite track from them before their newest era. It starts at XI. Where's Oversteps before XI? It's a very good track. There's several other incredible tracks there. Drop. It's definitely a little inconsistent. That's why it isn't higher, but there's some very good things on it. Also, it's the first thing that isn't really an EP because it's the same, like it's called EP7, but it's the same length as their albums are usually. James Ferraro Skid Row, first of a couple. James Ferraro. This is also low because I don't think it's fully clicked yet, but there's some. So, James Ferraro, you'll probably have heard of him for Far Side Virtual, if you've heard of him at all. This is past his Far Side Virtual. We will get I think one or two more things from before Far Side Virtual. Far Side Virtual itself I don't really care much for. But yeah, Skid Row. It's in his R&B era. It's influenced by like sort of like soft rock, radio music. Uh, but it still has this sort of industrial edge and hip hop R&B vibe at times. I don't know what my favorite track on it is, because this isn't NYC Health 3 a.m. My favorite track on there is definitely Stuck To. This doesn't have Stuck To. And the whole thing's pretty good. Aphex Twin Window Licker, it's just there because the title track's insane, and then the track after it's pretty good. That's all there is to say. You should hear Window Licker. It's just 3 tracks long. You should really, really hear this one. Autechre for Confield. This is a lot of people's favorite Autechre album. I'll get the Window Licker out of your review. I don't like the cover. Sorry. The cover is too stupid for me. This is a lot of people's favorite Autechre album. It's like arguably their most groundbreaking. It's right after LP5. It's where they really, really start to get just bonkers. Sounds like nothing else. Most of the tracks here are great. I would describe it as sort of their most overall disgusting album, but there's still a lot of hidden beauty in it. I'm not a Confield superfan, so I can't really go over it, but Confield's pretty good, yeah. Pen Expers. Probably go listen to Pen Expers if you want to try anything. Another really chaotic album, Wobbly Wild Y. Another hip-hop album, kind of. It's sort of hip-hop, I think, radio sampling, which is a weird theme. We've like 3 albums on here that are this slow. They're in these 3 things that are explicitly radio sampling. It's kind of weird. But it's sampling a lot of radio stations and a lot of sort of hip-hop stuff. And it just creates an absolute clusterfuck. It is very, very dense. It is very fun. If you like YTP YouTube poop, you'll probably like this, because it sounds a lot like that, despite predating it by about 5 or 6 years. Very good. And there's also, humorously, there's the entire lyrics written out, and the track titles are lyrics. I would recommend it, because it's like sort of immediate and just being, what the fuck am I listening to? In another way, here's Scott Walker's Bish Bosh, famously his weirdest album. A lot of great, See You Don't Bump His Head, and I can't remember the title, the Red Dwarf track, the 22-minute track, are both incredible. And then there's, of course, Epizootics, which is just amazing. There's nothing that sounds like this. I should hear the rest of the experimental Bish Bosh, or experimental Scott Walker trilogy. But for now, I know I definitely love this one. It's silly, but harrowing. I would sort of describe it as, since it is his last album, I do kind of wonder if it was like him thinking, I'm going to die soon. I want to release something about death. And that's what this is to me. And when you think of it through that lens, it becomes a lot darker. Because it's this... The lyrics are very, very weird. The soundscapes, of course, are too. But the lyrics especially, and the vocal performance, and then the production is minimal and repetitive and weird sounding. You can go try Epizootics. That would probably be a good one to try, because it's the most normal one on the album, but it's still very weird. I might hear Scott 3 or 4 from his class era. Scott 3, I think, is on my list of things to hear. So I'll probably hear Scott 3 at some point to get an idea of how he normally was meant to sound. Famously, he was actually a pretty normal artist growing up in the 60s, but his last 3 or 4 albums are all very weird, and this is the final one. Toshimaro Nakamura, No Impotent Mixing Board. The only truly weird electroacoustic album on here, which kind of sucks because I listen to a lot of this kind of stuff. But also, this is probably the first straight up. I would probably describe it more like techno, very minimal techno sort of vibe. Um, it's a bit hard to describe because it's very apparent in what it is, but it's relaxing. It's cool to listen to. Above these albums that are like very powerful, it's something that you'll see going up. That there's these things that are occasionally just not that powerful, but are just nice to listen to, but still keeping a unique sound to them. Uh, I can't describe it that much. It is literally no input mixing board. So you're thinking like you have a mixing board, you're making a bit of sound, or like it's picking up feedback, and you're like plugging in pedals and stuff to that, and you're getting these loops out of that from the feedback going like, but weird like sine wavy sounds. It's kind of surprising how normal it sounds. It really does kind of sound like techno. Um, it's great. I'm gonna hear the rest of the series. There's like 8 of these albums. And Toshimaro Nakamura himself is very famous in the EIA scene. Electroacoustic improvisation scene. I want to say Onkyo because he is Onkyo, but I don't like using that word because it's just this very specific scene. This is technically an Onkyo album, but it's this very specific scene that doesn't describe it very well. Like, it's a bunch of random, unrelated stuff sort of thrown together by a couple artists who are trying to push pure sound, like what something listens to, as sort of the point of listening to it. There's one more thing that's Onkyo adjacent, much higher on the chart, which I'll get to when we get there. Here's Age of, One No Tricks Point Never. He has a new album coming out soon, in about a month. He has an album after this, which I'm not going to listen to because I have this funny thing. Like with Aphex Twin, it's, I care because you do. I've heard Ventolin, but I just think it's funny, like, what if I just don't listen to an album from an artist I like? Just skip it. Yeah, I've heard Ventolin. I don't need to hear all part of a song. People like it, but who cares? I'm just gonna skip it because screw you. But Age of, it's his first thing that really leans into straight up pop music. There's a little bit of it on Cardinal Delete. A lot of people don't like this album. I am kind of rare in liking this album as much as I do. I was excited for it to coming out. At first, I didn't really get it, but the whole package here is really nice. A lot of the tracks are very good. It's overall a very nice album. It's like top 4 for him. I think there's 3 other albums by him above it, but it is very good. Autechre and Vain. More Autechre. Yeah, another EP. It's just 4 tracks. I really love 3 out of the 4 tracks. Gauze Quarter, Laughing Quarter. Absolutely incredible tracks. You should go listen to Gauze Quarter. And probably Laughing Quarter. Yeah. It's good. It's not much to talk about. It's Autechre. They're very good. It's the one that comes with Chiastic, but I much prefer it to Chiastic. Also, it's what's it called? Falling Water by... It's a very famous structure that's been abstracted on the cover here. You can, if you know what Falling Water looks like, you can see it. Bowery Electric Beat. This is sort of a... I should have specified this earlier. This is sort of like a shoegaze adjacent album. This is also sort of a shoegaze adjacent album, but it has this really cool trip-hop sound. It's just like using repetitive, looped samples. The cover is very fitting because it's like a shoegaze album, but it's like this color, you know? It's like urban and dark and kind of nocturnal. It's one of my go-to put something on just to chill out albums. It's very pretty. First track is very good. There's a drone track a little later that I like drone, but it's a little too long for me. Well, I like drone, but maybe not like a 17-minute drone track on your normal album. Something I struggle with a little bit unless that drone is like God tier. Anilek, Loop Finding Jazz Records, another chill album. I put this on a lot at school, first couple tracks. It's what you put in the clicks and cuts genre, which is sort of the specific set of people from the early 2000s who were mixing glitch music and minimal techno music. This has definitely a house vibe to it. It kind of sounds like the cover. It's very relaxing. It's very this color. It's very chill. Has If you like ASMR, this is an ASMR album pretty much. No voices, but it sounds really good on the ears if you have headphones. Picture Plane, Split Bird Red Throat. One of the newest editions, this far up. How do I even describe this thing? In the summer, I get really attached to music that's sort of like this blown out, abstracted version of like indie pop, bit of like an Indian indie rock. I don't usually listen to much indie rock, but this is sort of vaguely in that realm. I'd say there's a definite emo influence on here too. Um, it's very saccharine. It's very emo, but it's also very noisy. There's a lot of meandering noise experiments. The sound quality is lo-fi in a way I really like. It's a good album. It's really good. It's very obscure. Um, the guy is a little more known for his later stuff, but yeah, this one's very good. I don't know. The guy doesn't have cis male energy. And the last here, Waning Souls of Sand by the Angelic Process. Another doom metal album. Definitely similar a little bit to Grandeur of Hair, but just even more crushing. Not as heavy, and not as noisy, but still just. It is really striking. I really should hear Death Consciousness because this is probably in a similar vein. If you like Death Consciousness, if you like doom metal, you should hear this. Presumably, I don't know, I haven't heard Death Consciousness yet. And the mixing being a little weird is the only reason it's not this high. The drums are very loud. It's a very, very sad album. I put it on when I'm in the shits. I'm in the worst mood I can be. This is the album for that occasion. That's why it doesn't quite hear, because I am happy a lot of the time, and this is very sad, crushing music. The guitarist broke his hand and committed suicide a couple months after the release of this album, and so that's a big part of the lore, and that's the big reason why it's so heavy, because it is just like crushing end of the world music. I'm gonna minute silence for everyone on this list who's passed away. When I hear about people's passing, I give them a salute. I don't care about the military or whatever, but that feels like the right thing to do. Thanks for serving us, guys. Nobukahori, Exterior Milky Hair. I have this on CD. That's probably the biggest reason it's here, because it's one of the first really weird pop albums I heard. If you would call it pop music, it's definitely very influenced by weird electronic art pop stuff from its era, but it just goes so much farther. The sounds are really abrasive. The vocalist is sort of just this meandering, childlike. He's like, I can't really replicate it very well because it sounds very unique. There's some very high frequencies and noisy passages on here. It sounds like the cover. It's very pretty. It's a little bit pretty, but it's very sharp. It's very abrasive. Here's something kind of out of my realm. But I love this guy, Neil Cicerega, Mouth Moods. It's my favorite of the mashup albums. If you're like a more normally person, this is probably the most accessible album on this entire list. Even if you don't know a lot of the things it's sampling, he just twists songs hilariously. Like there's Floorcorn, Wow Wow is an incredible remix. Uh, Time, The End. Um, do I have Mouse Silence a little higher than this? No, because some moods, Mouse Silence does have slightly higher tracks. My favorite mashup track in all of these is Numbers from Mouse Silence. I love that one to death. Uh, yeah. It's very good. I'm not going to spoil much more for you. Bullet Heaven, 003, 005, A Lovely Pair. It's one short track. It's about 15 minutes long. It's very beautiful. Nature recordings, sample from a movie, beautiful guitar recording, perfect sound quality, very emotive. You should put it on right now. It's very beautiful. Or not right now, but later. Another one that's very easily recommendable. It's just beautiful. Bullet Heaven, little secret. There might be something from someone I know coming out about this band, so hopefully you might know this band a little bit more by then. Square Pusher, Damage and Furies. After, what is it? Fabulum, which is his most disliked album by people because it kind of gets into this like 2013 EDM vibe. He takes that, he pushes it a little further on this. I hadn't heard Fabulum. I heard this way before I heard Fabulum, but it's great. Opener is maybe his best track. It's just this beautiful anthemic song. There's Wake Fire 2, which is another really, really good song. And the rest is consistent enough for it to land a 9. Aphex Twin, RDJ album. Very playful, very silly. 4 is one of his best tracks. I don't know, 4. I love 4. That's all I need to say. Another Autechre album. Another Autechre EP. Garbage. This came with Amber. They go into more... This is probably their most straight-up techno album. Takes a lot from ambient techno. Well, the stuff before it actually is more techno, but... Incannabula is definitely more techno, but it's their most techno one I like. Very heavy ambient techno, dub techno influence, especially on the opener. It's straight up a dub techno track. The last track, Lotto Mix, is beautiful. Almost doesn't sound like Autechre. It is just straightforwardly a beautiful loop that just gets louder. It almost clips in one part. Beautiful melody loop. Amazing track. The whole thing is lovely. And that's why it's here. Probably one of the most esoteric picks on this entire list. Bullet Heaven 263, internet handle for a 13-year-old girl. This is... If you want to get this, it's in a PDF, and, like, you're meant to be able to open the PDF, and it just plays this. If you're going to rate your music, I have a big review, but TLDR, the first section and the last section, which I made a layout to, are original by Clayton Counts, half the member of the band. But the middle section is entirely stolen from one of their haters who was trying to make a track that sounded like, just like a joke, you know? It was trying to sound like, Bullet Heaven fucking sucks. Let's make a horrible track. It was part of this niche joke Google core thing where you'd chop up Google text-to-speech. But it sounds good, weirdly. If you have really fucked up taste like I do, that middle section, which is 95% of the album, sounds good. And the first and the last sections on it just make it good. It's empowering, it's beautiful. Well, no, it's weird. It's fucking weird. The last section is incredible. I've kind of ruined it by making a layout with it, but it's lovely, and that's why it's here. Okay, on to probably the least accessible thing, if not this, on the entire list. To live and shave in LA, the wig maker in 18th century Williamsburg. I don't know if there's going to be anyone here that just listens to noise music. Noise music has kind of failed me, honestly. I like electroacoustic more. I like weird sound collage. I like weird concrete music. I like weird industrial music. But a lot of noise music is kind of boring to me. But this is not boring. This is complete fucking insanity. This is the only thing I've had to censor on this list. There's, cover actually does extend all the way up. But there's images of women's breasts for some reason. You wouldn't even be able to see it anyway, but I did have to censor that. To Live and Shave in LA is a group, I think they are actually from LA, from the 90s. Just a giant group of people just making weird experimental music. Andrew WK was part of it after this album. He was part of the group later. He was in the weird experimental music scene at the time, which is kind of surprising. It is 2 hours of... If you like noise music, this is an essential listen to me. This is my favorite straight-up noise album of all time. It is crass. It is weird. It is... The vocalist is this baritone... Tom Smith, the vocalist, leader of the band also, is this baritone, slurring... you can, compare him to, a glam rock artist or something... vocalist or something, and over that, just some of the most, for 2 straight hours, ridiculously dense collage noise music. It may not even fit in noise music. There's a little bit of screaming and stuff like that. It does sort of take from, the power electronics thing. It does take some noise rock. The thing as a whole sounds like one thing, but every little moment is its own special little nugget of just weird fucking sounding things. Again, it is 2 hours long. It is an experience and a half. I love it to death. I've only heard it once. That is very rare for this chart. To only hear something once and being like, no, that's a 9. But it is. It is the one on here that is, by far the most... It is ridiculously, what's the word? Well, it's impressive that it was made, because even with, 14 people and a bunch of collage and stuff, it is absurdly dense. It is, on top of being 2 hours long, it is one of the densest things I've ever heard. It's a weird one, for sure. It's probably literally my least accessible thing on here, but if you already like noise music, you need to hear this. If you like Gary Gary, if you like John Weiss, if you probably like White House, if you like noise rock, you need to hear this. It's all those things rolled into one. Tristan Parrish, One Bit Symphony. See this thing on the cover? That's the album. It is literally 1-bit chiptune music, but taking a lot from classical music, especially minimalism, i.e. Steve Reich. It's technically more post-minimalism because it's not all that consonant. The first track is beautiful, but it is very, very ear-piercing. It is literally normal chiptune music, 8-bit Mario era. That's 8 bits. This is 1 bit. It is impressive that it can even make good sounding music. It is one of the rawest things on here. Heck, if you like black metal, really raw black metal, this is way more consonant than that. There's no screaming or crazy drums or anything, but if you like that, you'll probably like this too. Weirdly enough. It's that raw. It's just the whole time. Boards Canada, GeoGaddy. My favorite Boards Canada thing by far. Another thing, I haven't heard Tomorrow's Harvest. I'm never going to if I can avoid it. I just think it's funny. People like Tomorrow's Harvest, but I don't really care. I think it's funny just to go, nope, I'm not gonna listen to that one, even if I probably would like it. Just why not? Make it weird. Um, if I had to guess, this is probably their most influential one. Like the weird analog horror kids. There is a track on here that's actually used in there's an interlude on here that is used in Salad Fingers. So that should give you an idea. There's references to Satanism and cults on here, but it's still really beautiful. It's still really harrowing at times. It's by far their most emotional album. It just hits straight to the heart. Uh, Gyroscope, Devil in the Details, uh, Music is Math. The whole thing's pretty good. Oh, Dawn Chorus, obviously, which is famously sampled by Blink Banshee. Uh, Dawn Chorus is the best one on here. I fucking love Dawn Chorus so much. It is not by far their best track. Their best track is Dave and Cowboy, but it is their second best track. Here's a pretty early one for me. Jeremy and Fenderson, Oscilloscope Music. So, I had another review of this, but it sucked on RYM. Um, Literally, the music, the sounds you are hearing, if you put them into an oscilloscope, which, does sort of this to it. It sort of looks like this, but not pixelated because, um, it is literally the sounds you are hearing are the thing itself. This is one of the most inconsistent things on my list. The middle section isn't that great, but the front couple 5 or 6 tracks just have this incredible progression and are all really cool. And the last 2 tracks are really cool as well. It's a more accessible one because you get this gimmick. Like, what you're hearing are literally, or what you're seeing are literally the sounds you're hearing. And because of that, it sounds really weird too. It sounds like nothing you've ever heard. The textures are bizarre. The song structures are minimal and raw. It's really cool. I really like it. It was the first very early thing for experimental music for me. It definitely has more of an sort of EDM, either old EDM or new EDM, which is kind of where it fails because it tries to make like weird bro step in a couple tracks, and it doesn't do that very well. I mean, it looks cool, but it doesn't really sound that good. Or, yeah, it doesn't really isn't put together that well. If you like this, you should also hear his set from capital of Croatia, I think it is, which is more techno, more a little rawer. Um, there's a set of it on YouTube. There's a remix or two from here on there. It's very good. One of my favorite Jarbeam tracks is on there. I can never remember the title. It's a weird title, but check that out if you've already heard this. Is it Ljubljana? No. Split. That is the capital of Croatia. I don't think it is in Split. It might be in Ljubljana. I don't remember. It's somewhere in the Balkans, Eastern Balkans, where that set is. Jim O'Rourke, I'm happy and I'm singing in a 1, 2, 3, 4. Probably the most, well, this is 2 actually. Electroacoustic album on here. Beautiful. The middle track, and I'm singing, is gorgeous. The last track is really nice. The first track's kind of whatever. But the middle track is just beautiful. It is exactly what I love out of glitch music, out of electroacoustic music. It is gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. And that's a big reason why it's so high. I haven't heard as much O'Rourke in either his normal music or his experimental music. I haven't heard Gastro de Sol. I haven't heard a lot of his experimental stuff. I've heard this and another thing on this chart, and maybe one more album, and like a collab he did with one of the KG Hano collabs. And yeah. Slash F, Fourth Bully. This is up on YouTube. Creator took down her music a bit while back. Don't worry about it. It's not. You can find it on YouTube. And if not, you can find it in other places. Another fairly early thing I heard. This combines really weird digital textures, just really strange glitch music. Free improvisation. There's 2 tracks on here that are just these super dissonant, especially Girl Who Had a Shelter Life 1. Super dissonant, noisy, modern classical, improv, electroacoustic cello tracks. They're really harrowing. But on top of that, you also got these really cool, just straight up like tech house tracks. Just lovely, danceable, straight up house music. It's not like super lush house music. I don't know, it's more like tech house is techno-ish house music, sort of. So it's like sort of austere in the way techno music is, but has the format of house music. And there's 2 tracks on here later. Oil Torture and the other track, I forget the name. Yes, the one with the long Denpa title. Those are great. Whole thing is really weird. It starts off weird, but it's definitely her magnum opus. Shout out /F. She's getting a bit more attention from the weird experimental music zoomers for some reason. Yeah. Here's kind of a weird one. Telepath. I don't remember what this translates to. I just think of it as the Pink album. What is it? I don't know. But I don't care super much for Telepath. He kind of just does the same thing on every album. I know people love Telepath. More power to you. But this is his most straight up infamous album, just because it's weird. It would probably be higher if the first track wasn't itself looped twice. The songs are long, they're very meandering, they're very dissociating, they're very weird sounding. They're sort of... It's extremely hard to describe, but it's fantastic. It is definitely my favorite straight up Telepath thing. And one of my favorite Vaporwave albums in general, too, because it doesn't fucking sound like anything else I've ever heard. It's weird as hell, it's very drony, very, very repetitive, but gosh, it's really good. If you like weird experimental sample-based music that's drony and really weird on your brain, check this out. Let me go over to the title. It's this. Ekafen, My Way. More house music, sort of. I said earlier that there was something here that took from radio. This is also something built out of radio. So it is just kind of like house music, but all the little bits, it starts off kind of normal, but then for like straight up 40 minutes of the album, you have these just cut up little slices of samples from radio. And it's just like there's a couple tracks on here that start off and it's just like, and it's like, how is that going to become a track? And then it adds a house beat and you're like, oh, and it just clicks. It's just like, whoa. It's one of the newest 9s I have here. It's really phenomenal. If you like dance music, you should hear this. If you like weird dance music, you should hear this. The whole IDM thing draws people away from, you know, the straight up dance music, which is experimental and weird like this. Because this isn't IDM, it's weird collage-y house music. But it's good. It's really good. Ryoji Keita, Dataplex. Speaking of dance music, this starts off, bleeps and bloops. The most bleep bloopy, chaotic music you can think of. Some of it probably literally just takes from, like, data, raw data. But slowly over time, as the tracks go on, there's this slow building progression until you get to Data Matrix, which is his most famous track, which is just this beautiful minimal techno track. There's like a little... It's 10 minutes long. Everything is building up to that point, and it's just this beautiful release. And then there's Data Adplex, which makes your CD stop if you... It's not going to harm your CD player, but it will make your CD stop, because there's data on there that if you put it in your CD player, it's just going to stop, because it's funny. It is funny. But, that track's just like weird noise because that's what it does. Shout out Re-Educator. Well, kind of. I think he's a little overrepresented. He overshadows more serious Japanese experimental electronic music that is sort of inspired by these things. And he gets to play at places, and he gets to do things like Red Bull and shit. Like, he's kind of like a celebrity of experimental music. Like, he's known for being a little weird, a little alien, but still fun in a little bit of a way. Don't listen to this if you don't like high frequencies, by the way. It's another one that has some very harsh high tones. Autechre, try Repete. More fucking Autechre. This is their second earliest thing if we're counting on this list. I don't care much for. I love Yolquin on Amber. I think Lowride's also alright on Incunabula. But this is where they really start. Definitely still influenced by techno music, but they're starting to get a little bit of that industrial edge that you hear in their middle era, or like their sort of like late, early era. There are a couple high frequencies on here, but just very satisfying, heartwarming music, despite being sort of cold and austere. Autism music. Most Autechre is, but this one, you definitely hear that. It's sort of like this perfect balance of experimental noises and sort of odd song structures and just sort of, techno. And I got way more into techno after I got into Autechre. Techno's fucking awesome. It sucks all this IDM era stuff, which is just kind of slightly fancy techno. Gets to overshadow, techno. Because it just gets popular in the history landscape and no one cares about fucking just normal-ass techno. Even though normal-ass techno is pretty damn good. I'll get back to you when I do the Watt Atkins compilation. Need to hear Watt Atkins. I've heard Drexia, who are a revival of that from the 90s. I need to hear my classic Detroit techno shit. Because I need to hear where the shit comes from. Because it's surprisingly industrial and shit. And that comes back here. Techno music is kind of industrial. Death Grips, Bottomless Pit. If I had to pick a Death Grips album from the later part of their discography that's a little more accessible, surprisingly, I'd pick this one, even though it has Hothead, which is just ridiculous, crazy. After the Powers That Be, I think they kind of went like, in between the release of the first disc, which I can't say the name of, and Jenny Death, Powers That Be, they kind of go, okay, we understand our internet presence now. This is sort of where we've gotten. And Bottomless Pit is the first album where you really get to hear that from them. They are playing with you, they're fucking with you, and also it's just really good. There's hooks, really strong hooks, pretty weird tracks, abrasive Death Grips. Who doesn't love them? Tires, Shadow Dog. Another one of the weirdest things on here. So I'm gonna go straight up. First thing you should warn here, the lyrics here are like reading out of a teenager's journal. There's a lot of sexual mentions, there's a lot of just fucked up shit in the first couple tracks. Well, not really. Well, okay, there are some kind of fucked up shit on this album, but it's raw, it's lyrics. You can find them on archive.org, the paste bin of the lyrics. They're hard to follow along because the production on this thing is one of the weirdest sounding albums I have ever heard. Like, seriously. It's like halfway between just total glitchy nonsense, like electropop, indie pop, like in indie rock. You get a little bit of that on here, like sort of has like sort of an emo vibe, but it's just this crazy, ridiculously cut up, produced. It's these songs just twisted and bent in these just super weird ways. If you're reading along to the lyrics, it just puts this pit in your stomach because it's just like the first couple tracks is just like, what the fuck am I reading? And then that sort of continues as the story gets a little better. Yeah, it's an album that's about, like, the fucked up nature of growing up as a teen on the internet. And so if you have, like, triggers for that kind of shit, you probably shouldn't listen to this. Because, yeah, the lyrics can filter people because they're kind of fucked up. But it's not a common thing to put on. I've heard it only twice, I think, but when it hits, when the mood hits for this thing, dear fucking lord, is this thing insane sounding. It's just... I cannot emphasize how weird this thing sounds. Like, I don't think I even did a very good way of describing it. I can't describe it. It sounds so weird. Okay, on to the big next row of stuff, and I think that is time for me to get some more water. Even though I'm not done with my water, we're gonna go get another glass of water, because I am talking, and I am being loud, and I am hurting my throat. Should probably emphasize that older album. Like, how do I recommend Shadow Dog to a GD audience? Because, like, this is not for people under 18. I can't legally, because there's fucked up sexual themes in it. It's about that horrible, fucked up tension, you know? It's just... But I fucking love it. I want to, like, emphasize, like, what it does to your brain. It's just... Okay. Alexander Panos, Nascent. So, you'll see it a little bit higher up. Frequent Dream Recall. So, when I was getting into music, I sort of got into sort of experimental... I didn't really get into, like, gross up stuff, but I got into sort of this weird niche of experimental neurofunk, neurohop music that was popping up around 2015 on SoundCloud. And it's where a lot of this stuff comes from. My love of industrial dark textures, weird sound design, weird song structures, EDM influence. And so on that album, which I'll talk about later, the closer is by... And theoretically, this is one... So this guy was technically on Newgrounds. So if y'all are GD people, you know that Rob Buck level? It's like the cyberbullying thing that he made for like a school project? It's just like a auto level. You can make it auto that is like 3 minutes long talking about cyberbullying. It's weird. But the guy who made that song later became this guy. And so he was actually... Which is weird because this is kind of boring tropical house track. Used to be known as Babacon, now he goes his real name, Alexander Panos. He got way more into experimental music. His stuff before this is kind of experimental, but the story of this album for him is that this is him, you know, coming out into the world. This is him, and this tension of him being like, I want to be someone. I want a future. That is something said on the album. It's a little cheesy. If you guys are Patricia Texan fans, she loves this album. But it takes from those things. It takes from this sort of electro-poppy vocal style, auto-tuned stuff. A lot of the lyrics are just these weird, twisted things. This is way more experimental than anything he'd done before. His influences are weird electroacoustic music and Autechre and a bunch of stuff I haven't heard of. Yeah, the actual album. Yeah, so it's like a little folky, very glitchy, very digital. For some reason, people are comparing it to. I haven't heard it yet, but Porter Robinson's. Fuck, what's it called? It's the Greenfield album. I'm fucking stupid. Oh my gosh. You know what I'm talking about. Not Worlds. It's the other one. People are a little comparing it to that. So if you like that and you like weird experimental music, this is probably a good bet. But it's really, really, really lush. That's what I should have said first. This album is lush as fuck. It is beautiful sounding on your headphones. It is this perfect continuation of experimental music into this just lush electroacoustic just oh my gosh. I'm so glad that he pulled through with this album because it's just oh my gosh. And you do hear a bit of that weird neurofunk experimental D&B shit on here too. You do hear a little bit of that. It's just these influences are just so wide. He's just compressing them. What you need to talk about the most is Reasons Not To, which is a 4-minute a cappella track where the lyrics are almost entirely generated by putting sort of little snippets of voice into things that become he has these beautiful harmonizers on it, and so it's just this. How do I even fucking describe Reasons Not To? And then there was the one that was used for the trailer, which is called Cycles. It's really lovely, and the rest beyond those are really lovely too. Cycles is just. It goes through these passages. Cycles is lovely, lovely track. And there's just these little nuggets of moments on here that are just so cathartic, so beautiful, so sincere. This is shit that's so heart-wrenchingly sincere. It is almost a bit cheesy, but it just works. That's what he was trying to do. That's what he was trying to do. It just works. It's also another one of my most recent 9s. It's lovely. I'm very excited to hear where he goes from here. He's probably gonna, if I had to bet, he's probably gonna go on to produce some really famous weird experimental pop album, because he's gonna probably team up with something. That's what I'd expect, because he's that kind of guy. That's kind of what I'd expect. But yeah, just this beautiful melding of weird experimental music, EDM, and electro-pop auto-tune music, and folk music, folky guitar, lush instrument playing. It's probably would be a little bit higher if I hadn't developed a bit of a, because I'm a pretentious fuckwad, bit of a thing towards just super consonant things. I like a little bit more dissonance than this is, but God, if it isn't beautiful and important. K. Bruce. It's K. Bruce, so I can't pronounce the title. That's the title. I call it the 2012 album. Speaking of weird experimental music, 3 in a row here that are just weird as fuck. How do I even describe this? It's just the most alien, fucking weird, weird. So, K. Bruce I did also hear from Frequent. This guy, we posted a Frequent, or K. Bruce track. Also, rest in peace, K. Bruce. He has this sort of like he had this sort of internal lore. He's just some dude from France, but he had this internal lore that he was like an alien. He's like, okay. And he's like, but then you actually listen to this, and this is, okay, that does sound like aliens made it. What the fuck am I listening to? This is one of the highest ones on here that I do not have fully clicked. There is the track that was used in Os. That some people know. I can't pronounce it because all the titles look like the title I showed earlier. But, yeah. Shout out K. Bruce. He's great. He's weird. He's very, very important to this whole little scene. This is dark, oppressive, extremely chaotic, meandering, weird. Yeah. Finally break out of stuff that is, well, I would say nascent is pretty accessible, because it's like inherent what it is. This is also a little bit accessible. This is a Vocaloid album. This is by Kikuro Miku 6. Weird thing I'd heard, this is a little popular among hipsters, but I'd heard, and it's also like popular among weebs, which is weird, because it's Vocaloid music, but it's weird, dark, twisty Vocaloid music with some weird sound, some incredible sound design, and some fucking weird sound design. There's a track on here that uses a gamelan sample. There's a track that just, there's two tracks nearby it that are just terrifying and harrowing. In general, it's talking about like childhood trauma. That is what Kikuro's music is generally about. Their earlier stuff is a little more overt and has more just straight up fucked up lyrics that I just am scared of. But this doesn't have anything quite that bad, even though it may allude to just fucked up childhood trauma. That's essentially what you're getting here. You're getting Miku. It's a Miku album, but, you know. Love Kikuro. This thing is special. It's incredible in how, it's probably their best. It's incredible in how it combines these, like, it has like a bit of a gothy, dark cabaret vibe. It has, which I don't usually like, but here, with this sort of vibe, it works really well. People really love Hole Dwelling. Hole Dwelling isn't my favorite, but I like it. XXX Cat, Cotton Candy, Darkness, what's it called? Darkness, I can't remember the name. It just has this middle section of tracks that's just fucking fantastic. And it's I mean, I got my sibling to listen to this, so, and they're like a theater kid, so you can probably handle this, but it's still harrowing, it's still spooky, it's still dark. You should probably be reading along to the lyrics. It's another thing where, like, if you have childhood trauma, if you can face art that's about that, it's probably going to hit really, really hard. You gotta talk about the sound design, and the composition is incredible. It's beautifully eclectic. No track does the same thing twice. Even the track that's like a relatively normal future-based track, which I can't remember the name of, is still beautiful, incredibly produced, incredible vocal chops. Love Kikuro, but I'm probably never going to hear another Kikuro album because this is just perfect. It is all that needed to be said for me. People like Kikuro Miku 7. Yeah. Let's go on to the next one. We are into the realm of me talking very long about these albums that I really, really love. 5-Star Hotel, Grey Data. So this is, I have listened to some actual footwork since I heard this. This is, if you don't really know what footwork is, you can just take this as okay. You can't, but if you really wanted to, you can just take this as some just really really noisy. Just so take some like fun rave party music, make it really well made, and then just take the volume and just turn it all the way up, and you got great data. This album is fucking loud. This album is really, really loud. It feels like just caffeine or higher fucked up drugs being just poured directly into your veins. Just like, ah! That's what this album feels like. It's really, really fun. It's really, really loud. I have heard some actual footwork since here. And I don't know if this is footwork or juke. There's similar things. Footwork is, I think, more of a dance, specifically a dance genre that people dance to. I have heard some DJ Boo. That's his name, right? God, is that his name? The Footwork guy. I did hear one of his albums. I'll hear some more Footwork because it's a great sound. It's a great scene. I'm not going to hear DJ Rashad, but that's probably a better comparison because I don't really like hedonistic male dude bro lyrics. But, I mean, some people like that. If you like sort of like gangster rap and... Not gangster rap, that's a terrible way to say that. Hedonistic, fun rap music, you'll probably like that, but I don't really care for it. This doesn't really have much of the, like, vocal stuff and weird sort of disjointed stuff that I know Footwork has. I know that's an influence on this, but you can just take this as being this... Okay, it's like trap music. It's sort of trap music adjacent. Footwork is sort of an earlier form of that. I guess that's sort of like what you can compare this to. Either way, it's very fun. It's actually by a trans woman. This album, great data. Yeah, someone I used to know. I think it used to be their favorite album of all time, which is very fair. This thing is just power through your fucking veins. It is exhilarating. Okay, on to something that is not as exhilarating. Autechre, draft 730. Told you I fucking like Autechre, there's so much already. So the middle era to me is Confield, Draft, and Untitled. They get better in that order to me. Draft is some people's favorites again. Where they really get into... Confield is sort of like the prototype for it, but this is where they really get into just how the fuck did you make that sound territory. I don't get every song on here quite yet, but there's some lovely tracks. I love Xylem Room. It's not a super popular track. It's the opener, but I fucking love Xylem Room. It's this woody texture. It's concrete-y. It just sounds incredible on my ears. The song structures, like on Tilted, it's similar to those song structures, but they fall apart. It's these loops that are dense and complicated, but then they sort of fall apart and become other things. The textures are very organic in a very strange way. It's really where they fully went. They just mastered their craft. For most people, that's Confield. For me, that's Draft. Because they just, like, they went nuts. It's definitely austere. It's a little hard to get into. It's Autechre. It's later Autechre, so it's a bit weird. It's not like an immediate recommendation if you don't already like experimental music. And even if you do, there's no guarantee you'll like this because it's pretty unique and weird. People really like Scriper, which is the longest track in the middle, French for theft. Well, that track's pretty good. It's not my favorite. It'd be Xylem Room. I like doing this without checking much. So I know there's Xylem Room, there's V-Proc. Those are my favorites. V Proc is a great track. You should go listen to it. V-PROC. That's my favorite from Draft. I don't know. It's hard to talk about a Saw Checker. This took like 3 listens to really get into my head, but it's a thing I like to sometimes put on in the morning for some reason. Kind of works like that, even though it's kind of weird, sort of dark experimental music. Something about it feels morning-y, sort of natural, like you're hearing these aliens make weird sounds out of wood and weird metals. I don't know. It's hard to describe. Saw Checker. It's very good. Boris, Flood. This one took it didn't take that much. I'm not the biggest Boris fan. My friend is a very big Boris fan. But, for me and her, this is where they peak. It's a slow build. Excuse me, fuck. It's a slow build. The first section is... So it's sort of a concept album about a flood. Spores, flood. It's a flood happening. So you get the raindrops coming down as these big sounds. It's definitely a slow build album. It's a pretty slow album in general. There's no fast parts. It's slow, super, super heavy, but in a way that is unique and natural, and it brings to mind a flood. And then the second track is more post-rocky. I don't really like post-rock, but he's sort of floating on a river. And then the third track is they bring out this beautiful metal, crunchy, doomy riff, and these beautiful lyrics, or beautiful vocals, and it just like, fucking hell, Flood 3, the third section, is just, it's why it's up this far. Flood 3 is unfucking believable. And then Flood 4 is just a slow build down from there. To me, the main riff on Flood 4 sounds a lot like the main riff on Earth 2. I think it's just me. It's a doomy, heavy riff. Yeah. If you like hipster music and you haven't heard Flood yet, you should probably go fix that. It's their best album, to me. To a lot of people. It's very good. Okay. Flaming Lips, Seven Skies H3. Another sort of concept album. This, for some fucking reason, gets rid off by a lot of people because it's in their Flaming Lips, one of their weird eras. I haven't heard their other stuff. I don't listen to 90s hipster music. I'm sorry, Flaming Lips fans. It's not what I listen to. Even though, yeah. But this, it is 24 hours long, and to me, you're meant to listen to it in one sitting, even if you have to sleep through it. What extremely long music does, this is one of the best extremely long albums ever, and also a very good introduction to it. It's loopy, but the longest section on here is 6 hours, and most aren't even close to that long. Most are 2 or 3 hours. There's a lot of sections that are only about 20 minutes. It's powerful. It's about losing a loved one. That's the concept of the album. The first section, you should at least hear the first section of the album, the first 25 minutes, which are the first section of the album. You should at least hear that because it is beautiful and harrowing. It's a song, it's like a fairly normal song. It's the most normal the album gets, but it's just stretched out to this beautiful, heart-wrenching 20 minutes. And there's later tracks in here. There's In a Dream. I can't remember. There's In a Dream. There's, of course, the fantastic what is it? Voices in My Head. can't remember the title. There's 2 exclamation points at the end. There's variations on that. There's improv sections. It's something I probably should hear through again at some point, but just the one listen of it is so powerful. It's incredible. It's one hell of an album. It is maybe a little inconsistent to my tastes, but it is worth it. So worth it. There's beautiful synthy passages. There's beautiful... It's something else, man. It's something fucking else. I will hear their 6-hour track at some point, because it is apparently even a little weirder than this, somehow. At least I kind of understand it to be. Yeah. If you're already into stuff that's like 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours long, you want to make that leap. You want to go to something that is in that rare camp of albums that are worth it and are also really fucking long. Do it. It's incredible. It's super recommendable. Yeah. Okay, on to probably the most normal thing on the entire list. Or one of them. Cockroach Twins, Heaven or Las Vegas. This will probably be a little lower, because I hadn't heard this in a bit when I placed it on the chart. I listened to it a couple days ago. It's still beautiful. It's their biggest album. I understand it to be a little gothy, but it's influenced by gothic rock, but it is essentially with the thing that really sparked this dream pop label. Cocktail Twins are known for that. It's very 90s. It's a very 90s album. I won't deny that. But, it's important. It's a fairly popular album. You'll probably have already heard of it. Cherry Color Funk, Foxes and Midsummer Fires. Both incredible. The last one is up there in my top 50 songs ever. Or somewhere along there. Incredible, beautiful track. If I like that darker take on this sound, I should probably be getting into some, like, The Cure or something. But, Heaven in Las Vegas. If you're a music nerd, you probably already heard this thing, but in case you haven't, you probably should do that. It's beautiful. It's very 90s. Yeah, it's more creative than you might think it is. Song structures are incredible. It's just, yeah. Okay, here's the only straight-up metal album on the list, Gorguts Obscura. How do I describe Obscura? One of the most influential death metal albums ever made. You can say that. Death metal minus its early thrashy elements. Let's just make some straight up... Let's do death metal, but not go into any tropes, is what this album was. It's dissonant, it's weird, but it's a little catchy. There's these little gems of moments in here, despite it being this crushing, brutally... It's not brutal death metal, it is technical death metal, but... It's this crushing, weird album. Weird diversions, weird passages. But the sections loop. You get Section A, Section B, Section C, Section B, Section C, Section A. And a lot of the tracks kind of follow that. If you aren't a weird experimental music fan, you should go do some like more normal death metal stuff, either like classics or more modern melodic death metal stuff. Obscura, if you don't already listen to all this nonsense, shouldn't be a starting point for you. But for me, it is, okay, I get metal. This is fucking awesome. Nostalgia, lovely. The opener's lovely. Can't remember the title, the French one. It's lovely. It's La Vie de something, Le Petit Mort. Something like that. It's a great album. If you've listened to metal, you've already heard Obscura. It's very famous. It's very influential. It's modern death metal. It is what modern death metal is. It's what death metal became after it. It has apparently copiers. It's why I heard this early and I was like, okay, that means if there's going to be a lot of people copying this, that means I gotta hear. Also, for a band called Gorguts, it's not that gory or gutsy. It's not like that super heavy, fucked up slasher death metal vibe. It's something else entirely. It is something. It's a weirdly a bit classical. It's a weirdly a bit. It's very experimental. It's very dizzying. But yeah, I should probably go hear like Death or Mayhem or fucking Mayhem. No, not Mayhem. Should go hear Death. I'll hear Death eventually. If you want to get into death metal, should go hear the early normal stuff if you aren't a fucking weirdo. But you know, Obscura. It's an important album. I really would love there to be more metal, but the thing I struggle with is everything on here has such different soundscapes, you know? That's what I got into in music. I got into music that has weird noises, that has weird soundscapes, weird melodies. This only really has weird melodies and slightly weird soundscapes. You know, it has... A lot of death metal, I think you'll find, has kind of odd vocals. Like, it isn't just... This has weird vocals. They're sort of like pigs shrieking. They're sort of like... There's two vocalists, which is really cool. It took me a while to get into, but I really get it now. The vocalists were the hardest part for me, and why I didn't get into death metal for so long, because the vocals are so harsh and guttural, and... But now I can't live without it. I can't live without death metal vocals. I get them. They're great. They're fantastic, actually. And this isn't just... It's... You know... It's Obscura. You should hear it if you like weird metal music, but you already have. Silver, it's called SL, formerly known as Sakura Burst. Deconstructing Nature. Here's the most EDM album on here. It's definitely influenced by Porter Robinson, but it takes it further. It takes it into that experimental, harsh bass music scene that I was into. Silver, this album specifically is very influential. It has brosipy influences, but it's really more of a drum and bass album. It's more high. It's higher tempo, but there's also like a lot of that experimental neurofunk stuff. But then it's also kind of beautiful, and you know, it sounds like the cover. But then it's also these crazy, really noisy drops. There's the Closer, which is fucking beautiful. One of my favorite EDM songs of all time. One of my favorite songs of all time. Cherry blossoms explode across the horizon. Incredible track. If you are a GD fan, you've already heard that track because it's used in that little. If you're a layout guy like me, I already heard it because the first drop of that track is used in Sugiyester's little distortion video, which did get finished with Gaiden and Holy. I think. Gaiden and Holy, right? I know both of them. But it didn't live up to it for me, even though I really liked that they did edited stuff. But yeah. If you like EDM, you should hear this album. This is another one of the more accessible ones on here. Even though it does get noisy and gritty, it still keeps that beauty. And if you're into GD music, it won't be too hard for you. You already listened to Extoller and shit, so it won't be too bad. Alright, more Aphex Twin. And my second favorite Aphex Twin album. I'm not that much of an IDM Aphex Twin head, but, you know, he's good. Here's Select Tsunami Orange Fallen 2. His longest album by, like, a lot. His most lo-fi album, for sure. Low fidelity. Not fucking lo-fi hip-hop. Fuck all y'all. Go listen to Nujabes. Um... Sorry. If you like lo-fi hip-hop, don't mind me. I'm a pretentious weirdo. Beautiful synth loops, sometimes light, sometimes dark, inspired by dreams. Gorgeous. Aphex Twin, unlike Square Pusher you'll see up here, who you can compare them, but they're different because Square Pusher is taking that drill and bass sound that Aphex Twin sort of at least brought into the bigger culture. That's what he does. That's what he did at least, but may as well have invented. Where was I? Aphex Twin is cool. I like him. This album's beautiful. I don't always put it on. It's more of a timey thing. First 2 or 3 listens I had were super sleep deprived, so that's sort of the mindset you'll want to be going into it. It's slow, it's meditative, but it's heart-wrenching, beautiful, really chill at times, but not in any way you would really expect from even ambient music. It's just different from ambient music. It does something different. My favorite track would probably be Hexagon. Really love Hexagon, which is the most techno track on the album. It's taking that soul of that ambient techno shit and just stripping off the beats, and you're left with these beautiful lo-fi soundscapes. And sometimes not so beautiful, sometimes kind of harrowing and scary, but it'll alternate between those dark moments, those tense moments. You know, there's famous tracks like Rhubarb and stuff. God, I am fucking killing my throat. Like, I do write-ups about this, but I'm just impulsive. I like to just give you a slice of me. I like to... This isn't about me, this is about music. Fuck. It's about me, because these things describe me. But yeah, I mean, if you like ambient music, this is one you have fucking got to hear. One of the highest straight up ambient albums, if not the highest, even though I treat a lot of music sort of like, you know, I got into a lot of ambient techno and stuff, so I sort of, yeah. Okay, here's Frequent Dream Recall. Fairly early on this list. Fairly early for me getting into, you know, full albums. Was that a cat? Or is that the kid next door screaming? I don't know. We have cats and we have a kid, so... Well, we don't have a kid, it's the neighbors. And we don't have a cat either, it's also the neighbors. But we have like 5 cats hanging around. Anyway, Dream Recall. Another album about dreams. Very explicitly this time. Some things I'd make compare to dreams in here, but this is just about dreaming. That is... And it's not about good dreams. It's about dark, harrowing, weird dreams. For being born out of EDM music, this is surprisingly naughty. It's surprisingly dense and weird. You know, not like the most weird stuff on this chart, but, you know, it's weird in its own way. It's, of course, Babacon was on The Closer, which is the best track, the 11-minute, beautiful closer. It is also a little cheesy at times. It is, you know, it's a little heavy-handed. That's why it hasn't really stuck around. It used to be one of my favorite albums, but it's a little heavy-handed. It's not something I always like, but, you know, it's good. This stuff down here, you can't see it, but it's Morse code and it says "You are awake," which is a thing you hear a couple times throughout the album. So that should sort of give you an idea what we're talking about here. But, you know, Frequent and his collaborators on this thing, fucking fantastic sound design. Dude's a legend. Yeah, you should probably go hear it. It's probably just barely outside your comfort zone. You may get lost in it because it's a dizzying album. There's sort of a mild hip-hop element to some of it. Not vocals, but sort of a hip-hop groove to some of the tracks, which is cool. Alright, people are gonna hate me for this. My second favorite Death Grips album, Government Plates. I don't know why this is seen as an ugly duckling in their discography. To me, it is great. It's the first Death Grips I heard, and it stuck with me. The music videos, the whole album, are great. The opener, which has a very long title I don't remember entirely. You may love her for her money. You may think you may think he loves you for your money, but I know what he really loves you for. It's your brand new leopard skin pillbox hat, I believe is the title. Which is like, the end is like a reference to a Leonard Cohen track or something. It's more repetitive. It's more weird in a way none of their albums are. It's a little more sparser and pared down. There's more of a dance influence, which is a big reason I like it. You hear a bit of rave music and dance music in here. It's where they really start fucking with Ride's voice. Especially as you go later on. You know, it starts off with You May Love Her, You May Think He Loves You, which is a great track. Everyone loves that track. People love Birds. Birds is a fucking weird track. It's one of their weirdest tracks, in my opinion. It has guitar by the male vampire in Twilight for some fucking reason. But it's just a fucking weird track. There's Two Heavens, The Closer, one of my favorite Death Grips tracks, top 3 or 4. Top one we'll get to later. Yeah, the whole thing, I don't get why this is hated. I don't get why this is the ugly duckling in their discography. People's least favorite out of their main albums. I don't get it. It's great. The music videos are cool and really add to it. There's less lyrics. It's their least lyric heavy album, I would definitely say. Which is, yeah. But, yeah, The Closer. It's bootleg. Fuck Who's Watching? That's The Closer, right? That's the title, right? Is it bootleg? Or is it Whatever I Want, Fuck Who's Watching? Fucking love Whatever I Want. Music video is where they really start to get into the meta aspect. I know, The Money Stores had a little bit of that in that era. And of course, No Love Deep Web. You know the story about that album cover, if you know anything about Death Grips. Yeah, I really like it. Okay, second James Farrow album. This is Bodyguard, Silica Gel. This is a collaboration with Yves Tumor, also known as, what's their name? I don't know. They're Yves Tumor. You know who Yves Tumor is if you're into hipster experimental music at all. They get a lot of stuff for some reason. But, yeah. They were together under Bodyguard for a little bit. And this is also another entry, like Skid Row, into his R&B era. Out of all of them, maybe not NYC Hell, because I don't know it super well, but it's the most straight up industrial one. It's I view it as a sister album to Inhale C4, which is very high on the chart. To me, you get this sort of... There's a couple tracks on here that sort of remind me of like Witch House, like Salem, which is really interesting. The sound design is a little different than anything else from this era, because you got Yves Tumor. And you do get a little bit of their stuff, a little bit of their more beautiful stuff, which I think I understand what their stuff is. It's more like, even earlier into their more experimental stuff, it's sort of more psychedelic rock influenced. I think that's sort of what's... You do hear a little bit of that on here, and on the Rain EP, which is also really interesting. It's really nice. It's really good. It just hits the soul. It's nocturnal. It's industrial. It's noisy. It's a little bit messy. The mixing can go from just blaring your headphones out loud to just tinny and small. And that's sort of Ferraro, what I like about him in his weird R&B era. His weird pop-ish music era. Like those things, it's very repetitive. The songs are one thing, alternating back and forth, drilled into your head. So another one on here that you may want to avoid if you don't like high frequencies is definitely some sort of sharp, industrial sort of sounds to this. Yeah. In a weird way, it's a bit sensual. It's a bit, like, close. It's a bit, in a way that no other Ferraro I've heard does. It's interesting. Yeah. I probably put them next to each other. No, I didn't. First of the three, so I'll first introduce you to Impossible Nothing. This one is Chronomicon. I don't know if it really should be up this high. The first 6 tracks are incredible run, probably my favorite run in his entire discography. Impossible Nothing is a hip-hop producer who makes very loud, sample-based music. His stuff is very crunchy. It's very, very noisy, bit industrial, very, very eclectic. Very, very wide range of stuff taken from. Chronomicon is where... We'll talk about Phoneminomicon a little later, and Grapheminomicon, which are my other 2 favorites. My other favorites beyond that are Phraseomonomicon and Numeronomicon. Also, all of those, he has 12 albums. No, he has fucking 14 albums, each of which are 4 hours long. If all of them were one album, it would be like top 3 albums for me. Easily. Maybe my favorite album of all time. Maybe. You know, it's over 50 hours of music, and Numeronomicon is 8 hours long. I'm at this point now where I don't even understand his albums fully. Like, I have Phoneminomicon, which is the first one I'd heard. It was a thing I heard fairly early into my experimental music phase. Or, not phase, life. It's great, but where he goes from there, he gets denser, he gets noisier, he gets weirder. And Phoneminomicon is already weird. It's not normal hip-hop. It's like a step beyond J Dilla. It's more eccentric, more... There are a couple of J Dilla samples across this thing. I gotta take a break after this one also. So Chronomicon, aside from Phoneminomicon, his most stripped back album, and his most weird song structures. So, the way an Impossible Nothing album works is there are 26 tracks, each named after a letter of the alphabet, or On the later ones, the numbers 0 to 100, or 0 to 99. Well, 1 to 99, and then 0, so 100 of them. Which are, yeah. So this is the 6th album, so we get tracks AA6 through ZZ6. I think yesterday I did the run from the thing about Impossible Nothing is it's sort of like a meta thing where you can like do sort of runs on his albums. GD brain talking. But you can sort of do this track to that track, and that is an hour of music, and you can just put that on as an album. Or you can just, when I was going through all of these, what I did was I split each album up into 4 sections, and I did one session at a time for a day. It took me about a month. It's one hell of a commitment, but it's worth it. It's really, really, really worth it. I with all this other nonsense on here, I can't really overstate. Fucking, that was worth it. That was like 50, 60 hours of music. I don't regret it in the slightest. I'm gonna probably go back for seconds eventually. And I've heard a lot of these things, a lot of these tracks, many times. Phone, Funny Con, I sat with for quite a while. I first heard it in 2018. I later heard it again, and then a third time. And I've heard a lot of tracks on there. Notable tracks on here are AA6, which is his first track on any of these that is just one long section. Just this slow build of this sort of dark sound. I wouldn't call it, it's ambience, but it's not, gosh, it's hard to describe. That's this thing in general. Then we have BB6, which is beautiful, one of my favorite tracks from him. EE6, another beautiful, even more beautiful track. And mostly those tracks are why this is up so high. Anyway, but, you know, those first 6 tracks, my lord, so good. It's hard to talk about because it's so much, but I am going to take a break. I need to use the bathroom. And we're back. Is anyone gonna watch this? This is gonna be like 3 hours long. Is anyone going to watch this? Another thing I forgot to mention here. Every single track in this series, he does have some stuff before he's like deleted, and some work he's done with some other artists. Every single track in this series, the Nomicon series, is 10 minutes long. Every single one of them. And so you look at it and it's like, okay, this looks like a gimmick. This doesn't look like music. This looks like the weird, gimmicky art project that isn't gonna be that good. But if you get into it, and you have a prehension for sort of weird soundscapes, he's weirder than hip-hop usually is. In fact, he isn't always even hip-hop. It's hip-hop beats, but not all, not always. Should I have lozenges downstairs? I'm gonna fucking kill my throat. Okay. MMPH Choreograph. It's another EP. This was released on Business Casual, which is like a Vaporwave label, but this guy is fairly obscure. The most he's known for is remixing a Perfume Genius track and doing production for a Serpent with Feet album and like a couple miscellaneous remixes. That's all this guy's known for. He doesn't have much. He put out a new EP this year after a while. This one isn't even really canon to him. Doesn't really consider. I don't think he probably even considers it part of his discography, which makes sense. It's a little different than his more epic style that we'll get to soon enough. But this is lovely. It's as always glitchy sample-based music. It's what a lot of stuff on here is, but there's a definite dance music influence. But I don't know, it is just super, super tight. Everything he makes is just super tight. They're all sort of EP length, but everything he makes is just tight and just works the whole way through. And this does that. It's a bit glitchier. It's a bit more explicitly sample-based, at least on Business Casual. The way I found this guy was Dear God, which we'll talk about later. That's the name of the EP. Was originally released on Beer on the Rug, which is the label Floral Shop was released on. And so I just came across that. I thought, MMPH, Dear God, that sounds interesting. I'm going to listen to it. And so I did. Then that got deleted off the internet. And then it came back under another label. This is still up on Business Casual. You can still listen to it on the internet. It is very obscure because of that, because it's something that the artist doesn't really consider part of their discography anymore, of an already obscure artist. But it's worth it. I mean, above all this other stuff, I mean, it's worth it. It's really good. I don't think I could properly describe it. Dude likes sort of snaps. All the songs use just... I can't snap or replicate a snap, but he likes snaps. He has really strong grooves. He has really cool soundscapes. Really good ear for texture. It's good. K. Bruce, another one. So this is a very weird one to have as my favorite K. Bruce album, but it is. It's called That. I don't know. I call it the ambient album. It's not really one of his major albums. In fact, it's kind of a side. It feels more like a side project to me. It's actually used in sections on this guy. Little sections of the tracks are used there, but this is a sort of dark, droney album. But then, when you combine dark, droney ambience with a guy who makes weird alien soundscapes, you get something that is ridiculously atmospheric and unique. I believe it was released in the same year or a year prior to the other album. It's another thing I often put on at school, first couple tracks. It's relaxing, but it's dark. Something I like about a lot of music is an oppressive heaviness and a darkness that is still sort of comforting, and I would call that this. It doesn't change too much each track. There's like 4 tracks, they're each like 10 minutes long. They don't change super much, but the sound design is impeccable. It just sounds really good. And this is coming from someone who doesn't like a lot of ambient music. I don't like Stars of the Lid. I don't like Tim Hecker that much. I kind of like him. I don't like Finesse that much. Ambient music is a hard point for me. But when it hits, it's fantastic. I mean, when you're making something that isn't normal ambient music, I think it's on in the background is a bad definition for ambient music, because more of what it is it sort of sets a mood, and you may have to pay attention to get into that mood. So it isn't stuff you put on in the background. It isn't background music. It's, stronger. This is weird, synthy, bloopy, aquatic, dark, a little bit of oppressive, bassy, spacey, really, really well-made ambient music. So, Ilaguro, EP0, LP0. Another kind of weird one for my tastes. This is sort of a chiptune adjacent album. You'll see another one of those. You saw another one down here with 1-Bit Symphony. You'll see another one higher up. Describing this is a bit hard. You definitely hear a bit of an Aphex Twin influence. Probably more influence from stuff I haven't heard. Overall, this has a very big video game music influence, but it's different. It's how do I describe this? It's a little dissonant. It's a little industrial. It's fun. It's still fun. It's very atmospheric. It's pretty eclectic. The closer, as well, is possibly my favorite ambient song of all time. It is beautiful, crackling things of this beautiful synth melody and these beautiful changes it makes. Oh, it's one of my favorite songs ever. If you like video game music, if you're one of those dudes who just listens to video game music, this may not be a bad choice for you, because it's sort of in that cross-section of sort of weirder music and video game music. Ilaguro in general, she has this blog. I hadn't read much of it until recently, but I read 2 entries on it. Just talks along. Reconnections. Disconnected, reconnected. Let's see if I'm still online. Test. Test. Okay, we're still going. Yeah. I'm glad that reconnected and didn't just drop me off the face of the planet. That would have been annoying, because I'm just doing this so I can have a big monologue of my music tastes. Last Death Grips, my favorite from them. Mostly because of the second disc. The first disc has not. This is a double disc album. Uh, the first disc, frankly, hasn't clicked that much for me. I like some of the tracks, but the second disc is my favorite thing they've ever made, which is weird because it's so heavily rock influenced. But it is definitely their Jenny Death is definitely the darkest thing they've ever made. It takes a little bit to get there, but the final few tracks, especially on GP, which is by far their best track, which is crazy to say for such a good group, it's phenomenal. And that sort of being coupled with all this before it is why it's up so high. Even if I don't like the first disc, which I can't say the name of, that much, I like it, but it's... You'd think I'd like it more than I do, but... I don't know, it's weird and homogenous. The lyrics... I don't get any themes from the lyrics. I don't get the song structures that much. But then the second disc comes up, and, like, it is just hit after hit after hit. Especially as it goes on. It's just fantastic. That's why it's up here so high. It would be higher if it was just at Jenny Death. One Tricks Point Never, Replica. His first album, besides Echo Jams, which we'll get to. Well, it's where he steers a little bit away from his ambient-y, synthy stuff that, frankly, I don't care for as much as a lot of people do. Again, I struggle with ambient music. I like stuff that sounds different, and when I have all this music that sounds different and unique, why am I gonna go listen to something that kind of sounds like things I've heard before? Unless I really like that sound, which, in this case, I don't that much. This is his first album to, okay, again, aside from Echo Jams, really heavily used samples, and it's in this weird space in his discography where he hasn't perfected the sound design super far down. He's relying on these samples and manipulating them in weird, interesting ways, and doing it over his synthy goodness. Weird song structures, weirder sounds, cold, sort of frozen. It's definitely his coldest album. It's pretty famous. I don't know if I have to describe Replica, but, I might as well try. A lot of the tracks are good. I regularly forget how good it is. Like, it probably, I always think it should probably be down here somewhere, but no, it is pretty good. It has really good tracks. It's where OPN starts to become OPN, Here's Dear God, the reissue cover on Triangle, where that was glitchier and more dance music influenced. This is more cinematic. It's more grand. It's the first thing I heard from him. It's really lovely. It's where his stuff goes after this. Yeah, it's just barely better than Choreographed for me. The opener, Sun God, super duper atmospheric. Just build up to this big moment, wind down and stuff like that. And then Wilting, which is my favorite song from him, probably. Beautiful, crashing sounds. Just another enormous cathartic build up to just this beautiful soundscape. He's incredible. You should really check him out, especially because his discography is only 4 EPs. They're all 20 minutes each. I haven't even heard the new one, so. Alright. SHX, CX, CHC, XHS. Yes, that is the title of this band, or group. I do have that memorized. It says a lot about how much I love this thing. Um, this is a weird techno group from Sweden. This is the sort of colder of their two albums that I really like. I like a lot of their stuff that's below this, but not as much. I have heard their full discography pretty much. Their newest one probably has room to grow on me. They title things weirdly. See these S's? That's the title. It's 15 pairs of lowercase and uppercase S's. Thanks, guys. That's what drew me in. And, like, if you just go to Spotify and you just hold down the S key, you'll get this, you know? But what you get here is this bleak but still emotional at times. My older videos used, I think, the 9th or 10th track as my menu loop. So you'll have heard that if you've heard a lot of my videos. If you watched a lot of my older videos. Because it sounds like the GD menu music, which is weird. It has a similar cadence and stuff. It's just kind of a weird thing for something to sound like, but it does. My fucking throat. It just gets worse and worse. Autism be damned. This one's colder, more repetitive than its other one. Noisier. A little harder to get into than the other one I'll be talking about. It's just 30 S's, that's the title. But uppercase and lowercase alternated. Yeah, it's some damn good textured experimental techno. I don't know what to say, it's good. If you like techno, you should really hear these guys. They're really, really good. Jim O'Rourke, Bad Timing. Here's a bit of a curveball. This is a sort of folky album. Of all things, I have since gotten to John Fahey, who is the primary inspiration for this album's sound, but he's largely a solo guitar player. This takes very blatant inspiration from him, but then sort of transforms them and uses other instruments to create these autumnal, lush, expanding, folky landscapes. It's mostly acoustic. There actually are some electronic sounds, as you expect from an experimental electronic musician like him. Takes like electroacoustic stuff. Sorry, I need to drink. It's fucking... Room is just starting to warm up. I'm all just a little tiny bit warm. So, but yeah, folky album, kind of outside my music taste typically, but got me into the Fahey thing. Fahey's wonderful. He's not that weird. He's a little weird. He's an older musician from the 60s who kept going until about the 90s, but a lot of his classic stuff is from the 60s. But I have a fair amount to listen from him, so we'll be doing Fahey stuff. We'll see if anything appears on here. I don't know. It's good. This is good. Ground Zero, Revolutionary Pekingese Opera version 1.28. Another crazy sound collage album. So this is a very diverse album. It's overall pretty oppressive. Uses a lot of samples from commercials and stuff. Has quite a few musicians on it. I was part of the group Ground Zero, led by Otomo Yoshihide. It's fucking powerful, is what it is. Weird short tracks, big epic long tracks. So many influences, sort of like a rock influence at times, weird chaotic things, possibly rebellious or something against governments of China, um, while still being, left wing and stuff. It's a sample based album. It's empowering. It's has a lot of stuff. If you are willing to sort of go into the deep end, this ain't a bad thing to hear going into experimental music, because it has, especially stuff that isn't purely electronic, this has a lot of influences from a lot of stuff. And it's really powerful as well. It's extreme, but it has a story. Yeah. It's a hard thing to describe, especially now that my throat's going, but yeah. Autechre, again, Untilted. I think we still have 3 Autechre albums, 4 to go. They're my favorite group for a reason. Uh, this is maybe their sort of coldest and most austere album. No, we have 5 Autechre albums to go after this, don't we? Fucking hell. No, do we have 5? 5 or 4. Their most austere album, if you're one of those breakcore kids, probably the best one for you. It's the closest to that kind of shit, but it's still kind of weird. It's their least melodic album overall, for sure. There are melodies. Effectively, what this guy is doing is it's starting at one place, and then over the course of sort of a longer track, I think out of all their studio albums, this has the fewest tracks, maybe. Starting from one place, moving to a second place, and to a third place. It's going A to B to C. It makes sense, but it's still weird, and it's still... I don't know. It's their most straight-up, quote-unquote, IDM album, I would say. Aside from their earlier stuff, which sort of defined the early ambient techno wave. It's what you think now of glitchy beats and chaotic things. It's fun. It's fun. I can't. I need to go see if we have lozenges. Okay, we don't down here, but we definitely do in my room, so I'm gonna grab those. I'm gonna take another break here. Hopefully we don't disconnect over the break. Okay, we're back. I had a lozenge. Yeah. That group again. Linear S decoded. SHX, CX, XHX, CH, fuck. SHX, CX, CHC, XSH. Excuse me again. Linear S decoded. It's kind of like that other one, but it's a bit lusher. It's a bit, I like the cover. It's a bit more natural, a bit lusher. A little more relaxing. There aren't really that many as imposing bits. It's still rather experimental for what it is. It's pretty interesting. It's another, probably one of the more accessible ones on here as well. You'd probably like it. If you like any techno music whatsoever, you'll probably like it. Alright, first Vectroid, which is a bit weird, but there's a big gap between my favorite Vectroid and my, not favorite, New Dreams Ltd, Fujigrid TV EX. So this is, from her... This used to be a lot higher, I think, but now it is a little lower. Effectively what it is it's taking a lot of these samples from like 80s and 90s Japanese commercials, which is kind of the dumb part. Like, I don't know. Vaporwave in general has a bit of an issue with Japan, you know, but does often result in some pretty awesome music. These are commercials, often with sound of the background sort of twisted and turned and collaged together into other sort of songs. There's weird sounds, it's all very lo-fi. Yeah, I really like it. It's a pretty nocturnal listen. This is the second version of it, which has some more tracks and a slightly higher fidelity, which I actually do prefer. There's a bit of a slight sort of reverby, bassier quality, which I think is very fitting to the sound, and it just works really well. It's kind of funny I don't have any Vectroid below this, but no, I don't. Even though I have, I think, two above it. Yeah, two above it. Oval. Yes, that's how you say their name. 94 discount. Classic for the glitch music sort of stuff. Even though what glitch music really is kind of hard to define, but what this is CDs on CD players being sort of manipulated and chopped up and like messed with, and you get these. The opener, the 20-minute Do While, is the most famous Oval track in general. But the rest, I almost prefer. The opener is made from a Steve Reich sample, which is actually, it's sort of an extended cut of another older track they had on an older album, which is interesting. One of their first few albums, where they were doing something rather different. Still glitchy and lo-fi and weird, but yeah. Man, I really fucking killed my voice, didn't I? It's getting a bit harder because we're getting into the realm of albums I just know inside and out. That are just, like, integral to my experience of reality, that, like, how do I even go about describing these things? Well, this is a classic for a reason. The later tracks are more of what typical Oval of this era, Marcus Pop of this era is, but they're just the best. There's Cease to Meech, which is the album right before this, which goes into more like that, and there's the Microstoria Alias with some other dude. Oval started as a trio, is now just one guy, Marcus Pop, under the name, and he changed up again. I mean, he makes different stuff, more hi-fi stuff, I think. Of all her classic, this is a classic ambient record. But it's good because it's glitchy and it's textured and it's weird and it's melodic and it's not super high tempo, but it has a tempo, has a pulse, especially on those later tracks. It's beautiful in a weird, digital, corrupted way. It's an important album for a reason. It's real good. Here's Phenomenomicon. Impossible Nothing, Phenomenomicon. Wait, I put Graph above this, didn't I? Yeah, just barely. Okay. So I'm a little undecided on that. It's really hard to rank. This is the first album in the Nomicon thing, and the most famous one. It is where his sound starts. It is a little more stripped back than pretty much every single album following it. Especially as you go later, he gets denser, more chaotic soundscapes. But still, there are some fantastic tracks in here. This sets the bar for all the others to live up to. And so, very many really good tracks. Still weird. It's like not typical hip-hop beats. It's not... It's hard to explain. It's unusual, weird samples, weird feelings, weird forms, dense, loud, a little abrasive, not always hip-hop, but still fantastic. My second favorite track is 05 from Numeronomicon, which is just a beautiful house track, pretty much. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous. My second favorite track is J from this album. Letter J. Remember, all these are letters. Which is sort of starts off with a sample from... it is the one that stuck with me between my listens. So I heard this first in 2018, and then I heard it later, again, in the car, on a MP3 player that was broken and messed it up, and some of the tracks were wrong. And the order was wrong because it didn't transfer very well from my horrible Windows 7 computer. Which makes sense. It's a whole 4-hour long album, and the fidelity wasn't great. But still, that was my second experience with this. J is the one that stuck with me through those years. The one I'd think Impossible Nothing, I'd think J. Starts off with a weird sample from some Italian soft rock thing, and then something else, and then this ear-piercing harpsichord section, and then a trance sample with Jay-Z over it, a Jay-Z sample. It's weird, it's hard to explain, but the track just works. It's unusual, it's surreal, as is a lot of his stuff. But that's my second favorite track. It's from this guy. There's a lot of other good tracks on here. There's S, X, A, B. Probably more that you'll find interesting. I like Q. K is very iconic. Yeah. Dynamic Shroud, I'll Try Living Like This. One of the most famous Vaporwave albums of all time, for a good reason. Sort of the poster child of what I'd call second wave Vaporwave, if you really want to think about it like that. This isn't just vaporwave. It is songs. You know, this isn't weird sample-based music. This is songs. This is stuff, samples, taking from vaporwave, the sort of vibes and stuff like that. So you guys who are very good at what they do, and do very specific things, and just doing this. And something a lot of people notice about this album is it sort of has this weird, sort of devastating quality. It's poppy and fun at times, but it's still heavy and depressing and a little scary. No, not depressing, it's just sort of heartbreaking. It's like, this is sort of where they start using, it's their first, well, it's where they broke out. It's where they got famous from. And, you know, it's famous for a good reason. It's really good. These guys are more famous now, so you'll probably have heard of them if you're in any kind of music scene. But, yeah. I really like it. Everyone else does too. I skip the CD player track because I just think it's a little... it just makes me uncomfortable. There's a sort of sample at the end that makes me a little uncomfortable, but other than that, yeah. Alright, up to the big ones. The second biggest row. Man, we have so much to go. Grapheme Atomicon. Impossible Nothing. So, this is my favorite of all of them. What this guy's effectively doing is, it's like, just above any of the other ones, this is the densest of all of them. And it is probably the most consistent one, but I'm a little more used to Funny and Monomicon. I'm used to abbreviating them. Got another one of my favorite tracks from him, HH8. I've already mentioned every single. So, HH8 is this weird sort of dissonant. It's very dissonant. It's pretty much the whole way through. But the textures, the harmonies, it has a steady pulse and a groove, but it still has this dissonant, unpredictable melody to the whole track, and it just keeps going. A lot of his tracks can sort of meander from one section to another, which makes sense. This is 60 hours of music, for God's sake. But, man, dude has the ability to make some fucking hits. That's one of them. And there's a lot of other great tracks on here. There's DD8. There's, you know, it's great. You should listen to him. If you have, like, a lot of time, you should probably do his discography. Split up the albums. Just do them. If you like weird experimental music, you like hip-hop, you like sample-based music, one of the most essential things in music to me, but, like, not people aren't gonna have the time for so much music. Yeah. Vectroid Reset. So, this is another fairly early thing I heard. Vectroid, I didn't really mention before. Most famous as Macintosh Plus, Floral Shop, the Vaporwave album. But she is way more than that. And this is a very good example of that. This is very strange, dark, kind of spooky, collage-y music that just makes me feel in a way very little things do. It's weird. It's another one that is very, very hard to describe. It's definitely, like, what people attribute to Floral Shop of it being uncanny and creepy. She has that in spades, way more in other spots. But besides that, there's still elements of this that are cathartic and beautiful. My favorite Vectroid track, Gaze Dream, is on this, which is this just beautiful, I guess you'd call it like a chill wave track. It's because that's what she was doing before, even before Vaporwave became a thing, which is sort of a late 2000s internet music genre, loosely based on 80s music, but taking it a lot further. It's this lo-fi guitar track, beautiful synths, beautiful track, and then juxtaposed with that, you have like the opener, Sakano Reanimation. Just like harrowing, and you have like the track after those, the two more chill tracks, which I can't remember the title of. It's great. It's weird. It probably wouldn't place this high in many other people's lists, but I love it. It's very cool. It's very weird, and yeah. My favorite Square Pusher, Ultra Visitor. So this guy, well, literally a guy, but also this thing, this album. Sort of gimmick here is it's sort of meant to be like a very surface level explanation of it is it's meant to sort of sound like a live album, but it's not a live album. It's recorded in studio. It's a little more lo-fi, a little more distant. But fuck my throat. I really should have planned instead of just going in like this. Yeah, it's meant to sort of sound like a live album, but it's not a live album. This took me a little bit to get used to. I think first listen to this was like, okay, it's alright. Second or third listen is where this thing really clicked. This is really eccentric. There are a lot of tracks that do a lot of different things. What Square Pusher is so powerful for is combining these, he's a drill and bass artist. He does the Aphex Twin thing, right? But he takes it so much further than that. And this really shows that. There are tracks on here that are almost entirely acoustic. There are tracks that are dissonant, free improvisation. There's a track on here that's a grime track. There's a track that's almost like a metal track. He keeps this just super strong sense of melody the whole way throughout, and super strong sense of progression. As far as I know, this is his weirdest album. It is pretty weird. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's very eclectic, pretty messy, but man, absolutely essential for IDM nonsense. Any more than like any of the other classics to me. It's incredible. From Vignette. This is technically a compilation of their so this is more on the EDM side of things again. It's sort of like J-Core, sort of like Camellia in a way, but Frums knows a lot about jazz, same way Square Pusher does. And they use that very heavily. Another pretty eclectic album. Another what this thing does is it starts off this beautiful, heart-wrenching, really sad, surprisingly track. Just cathartic as hell track. And then from there, changes a little bit, and then you get to the halfway point, and the just insanity, hardcore, chaotic. People kind of call it IDM, but I don't know what this is. What Frums does is so unique. This sort of glitchy, jazzy. They have a really specific sound that I can't really describe. It's definitely like for EDM fans, but it's just so much more than that. Yeah. Yeah, we'll go on to the next one. I really love this thing, but I am running out of mental energy. It's another one that I did actually hear through GD. I heard the track Drop Dead. It's one of the later tracks. Yeah. Even though it's technically a compilation, it works very, very well as an album. I've heard it 3 or 4 times. It just becomes an absolute clusterfuck of just super, super, super dense EDM, I guess you'd call it. But, man, a very special artist. As good as Camellia to me, just not as prolific. Maybe better if more prolific. Well, still pretty prolific, honestly. Orange line. James Ferraro, Last American Hero. This is the reissue. So what we got here is, man, I should have probably split this into 2 streams. Sort of his take on, well, also, I never noticed that in the corner of that cover. Fucking hell. It scared the shit out of me. Is that in the real cover? No, it is not. What the fuck? Who did that? Is that on a version of this album? A bonus track version or something? What the fuck? Who put this into Last FM? Fuck you, whoever did that. Fuck you. Anyway, it does kind of fit that album in a weird way, but anyway. Last American Hero. To block that out, I fucking hate whoever did that. Fuck you. Is there like another one somewhere? I'm just gonna skip this. Listen to Last American Hero. Lemon Demon Spirit Phone. Another Neil Cicerega thing. Another fairly normal thing. Probably the most normal thing, the highest on this list. Because this is pretty much just a pop album. I mean, like, we have, like, Zoomers and shit, and, like, Tumblr kids. Well, I guess they're Twitter kids now that are into this shit. Oof. Who did that? This stream is a fucking disaster. Yeah. So this is sort of really like the basic level explanation of this is it's sort of like it's like influenced by like Halloween, like 80s and shit like that. But like that doesn't really put it right. It's sort of a synth poppy album. It's a bit quirky. But man, every track on this is just hammered over to just an unbelievable level of precision. I skipped the track Sweet Bod because it kind of creeps me out. The topic creeps me out. Like that thing. But, Yeah, it is a really, really, really well made album. It is very clear. It is sort of like a magnum opus work. It is like something someone worked over for a really, really long time, like 6 years or something. Everything is just perfect. It just works in a way very few song structure things do for me. Just an endless. It just hits every listen. It's just fucking love this thing. Okay, what's next? Plus minus. Ryojikeda. Plus slash minus. On the complete other end of another thing that is probably not a lot of people are going to like. Ugh. This is a very austere, very minimalist album. You got the first three tracks, which are sort of loosely based. They're just kind of chill, cold, kind of industrial techno tracks, pretty much. Still with his bleep bloopy sound. And then the rest is two sets of tracks, the plus tracks and the minus tracks. The plus tracks are sort of this, and it's like that sound for like straight up 25 minutes. It sounds really cool if you have fucked up taste like me. And then the minus tracks are sort of sine wave based drones that sort of get higher pitched and colder and a little freakier as you go on. This is for me when I'm having those moments. It just resets me. This is just a reset. It does not ask any emotion out of me. It just is what it is, and it just. If I'm having like emotional problems, is in terms of like. Like emotional problems, kind of like I'm having like I'm not really feeling anything. If I'm having like apathy problems, this is a good one to put on because it's not, it's not asking me of anything. It is just the sound in itself, and it's a weird one to be this high, especially because Dataplex is much more famous, especially among like hipsters. But like, it just works for me. It really got me into experimental electroacoustic music and stuff like that, and it's like the indication of a lot of that kind of stuff, like weird free improv nonsense from the 90s. Yeah, one of the oldest on this chart, Robert Sherman, Way Down, which is sort of like a classic industrial cassette era album. Man, this thing was a surprise. So, I got into lo-fi music through James Ferraro, but yeah, it never really. This is the next. This is the next biggest lo-fi music here. It's really crunchy. And it sort of made me realize, okay, this is what industrial music really is. I get it. There's a bit of like a synth pop vibe. It predates techno, but there's a bit of a techno vibe. It's just these really cool tracks. Really the thing about industrial music is that it's weirdly psychedelic because it's all lo-fi and it's all repetitive. So it gets this weird, dark, psychedelic, oppressive but comfortable feeling. This is that to a T. This is really lo-fi. This is noisy as hell. But it just... Man. This is another album that I certainly put on a lot. Like, this is another thing. I want to listen to something. I don't have much energy. What can I put on? I put on Way Down. It's incredible. It really should have more attention than it does. Even if it's maybe a little inconsistent compared to a lot of stuff around it, what it hits for me is just perfect. I love it so much. It's really, really good find. The Field. From Here We Go Sublime. So I'd heard of this thing for a while. It's another sort of thing hipsters seem to like in the techno realm. I kind of just thought it was going to be another Clicks and Cuts album. I didn't really think much of it. Until I heard a couple of the tracks in the Super Mario World hack, Casio Mario World, which is very hard and has a few 106 Point Never tracks. What we got here is like the most consistent album on here that doesn't have any of my favorite songs. This thing is consistently fantastic the whole way through. Pretty much. It's experimental. It's sample-based. It's a little austere. It's a little techno-y. It's a little trancey. It's a little repetitive and driving. It's a little housey. It's a little groovy. But it's, glitchy and digital. Well, kind of. It's ahead of its time. Very, very ahead of its time. Not a lot of people were playing with samples in the way this plays with them around this time, especially not in dance music. The song structures may be a bit simple, his sound may be a little simple, and it's very, very repetitive, but that's the thing I like. And man, this works really well. It's just from front to back, the whole damn thing, really good. I will warn that the longest track, The Deal, does have this little thing he left in where the feedback just spikes and it gets really loud all of a sudden. So around 7 minutes in, if you go to the Rating Music page, people are talking about it in the comments, where exactly it is. On my copy, I have downloaded the album, I have lowered that sound digitally, and it is a perfectly good chill-out album now. Very good. Love this thing to bits. Worthy of being this high. Disasterpiece Level. So this is by the guy who did the soundtrack for the indie game Fez and a bunch of other indie games and some movies and shit. Richard Freeland, also known as Disasterpiece. Not P-I-E-C-E, P-E-A-C-E. He's like a chiptune artist. That's kind of what he does. But this is way more than chiptune because there's a big sort of like rock influence. Like, it is very pure to its chiptune sound. Like, almost entirely, instead of like, other than like some noise, this is very clearly like 8-bit chiptune shit. The noise is still bit crushed and 8-bit sounding. It starts with like 30 seconds of noise before going into the first track. This thing is building. This is another. It's kind of embarrassing to say that in 2017 I was getting into albums. Like, it feels like an embarrassing thing to say after I heard all this other shit. But this is one of those first albums I heard and really clicked with me as a full listen. It's just this driving, progressive. It definitely has like a progressive rock vibe. It has a mathy vibe. It has like cool loops, cool stuff like that. It's definitely one that's personal to me, and may not be as good for as many people as a lot of this other stuff. But man, this is an album for me for sure. Even if I've fallen out a little bit of love with chiptune as I used to be, but this thing still holds up. It's this high for a reason. I'm a lake of burning orchids, summer in my veins. The highest EP on this, second highest EP on this chart. So this is, I guess you'd sort of like a noise EP with a twist. There are harsh vocals, but there's melodies. This is the kind of thing that is may even be like a little bit too much for people, either from it being so loud and just aggressive, or it being just kind of like emo. It's emo. There isn't anything directly emo about it, but that's what I'd call it for sure. It's music about lost love. It's music about just those expressions. It's a little cheesy. It's sincere as hell, though. It is pouring light just onto you. It's gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. The textures are incredible. It is not just noise. It is, it's a pretty good introduction to noise if you're coming from the emo side of thing, and you already got some noisy emo shit. Emo-y, punky shit. Love this thing. If I grow out, it might be something I grow out of later after I'm out of my teens. This is the kind of shit you listen to as a teenager. It's that kind of thing. But maybe I'll keep it in my heart. It's beautiful, meaningful. Love it. Makes me almost cry every time. I don't really cry, but powerful shit. Powerful, powerful shit. Aphex Twin Drux. Favorite Aphex Twin. Pretty obviously the best one. So what we got here is... This is really what defines Aphex Twin as a thing. You got... he's a little bit more known now for his piano works, and this is the album with those piano tracks on it. This is also the album where those glitchy Aphex Twin breaks really come in. And that's weird because it's both. You have impressionistic piano pieces next to these, really heavy, quite at times, fun, glitchy, high-energy tracks. This is another pretty early album for me. And aside those, you have some weird interludes and shit. You have weird diversions, almost some scary parts, but also some pastoral and fun parts. Some silly parts. It's like what Aphex Twin is this album to me. This is the Aphex Twin album to me. This is what his story represents. This is everything from his sort of classic era just in one. Well, not really the ambient-y pieces, but, definitely everything else. This is, what he is. And it's long, and it's messy, and has weird diversions, but that's something I like. With Queristus up here and Ultra Visitor, they sort of form this trifecta of shit by these IDM artists that is messy and weird and hyperactive and eclectic. This is a pretty new one to have gotten this high. I guess this is another kind of pop album. Clearance Clarity. Know now. How the fuck do you describe this album? Yes, it's a pop album, kind of. But, like Spirit Phone, this thing has just ridiculous production. Way beyond that. Full-on weird electronic production. But still powerful. Weird tracks, weird stuff takes getting used to, but powerful as hell. Everything leads up to the absolutely soul-destroying Cancer in the Water, which is just one of my favorite tracks of all time. Big reason it got pumped up this high. The themes in general, internet, sexuality, porn addiction, conspiracy theories. People. It's an album about now, but in a weird way that isn't obvious. It's another thing like Spirit Phone that has obviously been labored over incredibly. For a debut album, It's kind of unfortunate when you drop your magnum opus as your debut album, you know? Like, where the fuck do you go from here? I don't think I've heard only his weird unrecorded history album past this. And I don't think I need any more, really. This shit is fantastic. It sticks in your head. It takes influence from like boy bands like NSYNC. It takes R&B influence. It's an R&B album if you really want to call it anything. But, you know, it's so much far beyond that. We need a third break. I'll be back in a second. Okay, we're on the home stretch. Pretty much. Jeffrey, Counter Ledesma in summer. So, this is the highest EP on this chart. And, yeah. So, This is definitely a weird case. I'll go over the little bit of backstory now first. Love is a Stream by this guy, how I was introduced to him. Probably one of the albums that has grown off me the hardest over the years. It was once something I cared a lot about, and now it is something I don't want to listen to anymore. But he also happens to have made my favorite song of all time. And that is the opener for this EP. I don't really care about the rest because the opener is just... man. The rest is okay. It is a wind down from that opener. It is just... Love's Refrain. Shiver Canta Ludesma. Beautiful, beautiful song. I don't even know where to begin to describe it. Summer is... I said earlier that in summer I do like to listen to sort of like more indie or more emo adjacent shit. This isn't really either of those, but it has that spirit. It is cathartic, it is emotional, it is beautiful, 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 beautiful. It is just... how? You know? Just how? It's a noisy track, but it's noisy and beautiful, but then it falls apart, and it's just... it's not something I can do justice to in words. If you go to anything out of this, listen to that damn song. Love's Refrain. Listen to that fucking song. But, you know, being one song, one, means that it tops quite a few of these that are, like, full fucking albums. But just being one song means there's this stuff that is my favorite albums of all time that it can't compete with because it doesn't have that consistency. So it's a very weird spot. Autechre XI, more Autechre. Their 2-hour long thing, what really starts their current era of music they're in right now. I won't go over Autechre much because I need to save time because my throat is fucking dying. And also, this is really hard music to describe. Overall, this is probably their darkest album. I mean, as you can see by the cover. For their late era, they get really sharp, usually. They get really precise sounds. This is one where you get that roughness, that analog nature back. And that's what really made it click for me. It's dark as hell, sonically. It doesn't have lyrics, of course. It's weird, of course. It's Autechre. But there's moments of beauty really scattered throughout the whole thing, despite the dissonance, despite the weird, heavy sound design. It's Autechre. Then Oversteps, which has taken over XI, which I didn't really think was going to happen. Yeah. What really limits it from being in the tens is a little bit of inconsistency, but another thing with some of my favorite Autechre tracks, XI, of course, has, like, Blade Lords and shit, but this has even more. What is strictly billed as sort of like their, melodic album, I feel like is really misleading. What I found with this album is it's dense melodically in a way that their other stuff is rhythmically. The melodies here are weird and meandering and take getting used to, but are really beautiful once you get into it, and it's just hit after hit after hit. Like a lot of Autechre, it is really well constructed. But yeah, it's a little inconsistent. Some of the tracks can sound a little bit like each other. Going forward, they have tracks that sound like this album a little bit in general. But yeah, Oversteps. And we're into the tens now, so I shouldn't have too hard talking about these because they're all really obvious. Fuck Buttons, Tarot Sport. Another very early thing for me to hear as a full album. I heard the opener Surf Solar, as that's a track used in a Sound Dodger level. I heard it. Sounded nothing like anything I've ever heard before that. Sounds nothing like anything I've heard after it. Where a lot of things around this range are kind of dissonant with a little bit of consonance, a little bit of beauty inside of it. This is beautiful with a little bit of consonance and with a little bit of dissonance and weirdness inside of it. It's really psychedelic. It is really hard to describe. It is obviously their magnum opus as this group. I don't know if the cover really fits or not, because it is grand. If you like post-rock, I don't like post-rock, but it is that. It is big, crunchy old crescendos. It is something where not all the tracks really sound all the same. It being sort of more consonant and shit is why it is the lowest 10 and like on the border of why it is, yeah. But, you know, it's beautiful. It's an incredibly important album to me. I did get a copy of it off Discogs, which is a random library copy, which I was like $2 on Discogs, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll get it because it's $2, and I was like, yeah. It's like a really cheap library copy, like a copy a library would have to loan you, that like was made specifically for the library, so it's like the cover and doesn't have any of the fancy actual label CD shit. That's Tarot Sport. I would recommend watching this with the visualizer on YouTube, which is unofficial, but it's just some dude driving in his car from somewhere in southern England to somewhere in France, you know, going over the tube. I like that visualizer a lot. It's how I've listened to this album 2 or 3 times. But yeah, important as hell. Indescribable as hell, but beautiful. Beyond just genre into just pure beauty, is what I'd say. Fucking love this thing. Autechre. Almost there, out of Autechre. NTS Sessions. Well, not really. There's Autechre pretty much all the way up. NTS Sessions 1 through 4. Their 8 fucking hour long compilation thingy. All released. Probably their hardest album to get into. But at the same time, NTS 3, the third session, which is itself 2 hours, is my favorite thing they've ever made. It's kind of hard to talk about without talking about Elsec, which is the 4-hour album that came out right before it. But even more than Elsec, this is long, jammy sessions, really amazing sound design. I've done this whole thing. This thing is 4 hours long, and I have done it in one sitting before. It's fucking 8 hours long, and I've done it in one sitting before. It's very hard to talk about because you kind of have to hear it, and you kind of have to know about all other Autechre before going into this, because it pulls from pretty much everything before it. My throat. But yeah, it's a bit of a freebie because it's fucking hard to describe. And we're into the top 10, my top 10 albums of all time. This is CTO and Ray Sherman, GDGA1. This is a Vectroid album again. This is the highest Vectroid album. So I had heard this a little bit before. You know, I'd got into her because I'd heard of Floral Shop. Someone linked her Bandcamp to me at some point. This is like the first thing I clicked on. And this is her noise album. This is weird. This is by far the most abrasive thing she has ever made. It is very noisy. It is very loud. It is very beautiful, also. Once you get past the first 2 tracks, which do grow on you, certainly. And they're not analog noise. This is digital noise that I can't describe how cool it sounds. Like, it is just cool sound, silence, cool sound, silence. Then you get to the third track, which is another one. It used to be my favorite song of all time, 9 and 10. Before Love's Refrain took that over. I guess it would be my second favorite then. My voice. Yeah. Which is synthy. It introduces. It's slow and just beautifully unfolds. Noise, perfect. Just synth melody, surprisingly basic, but works. Big chunk and bass hits. Just an absolutely fucking gorgeous song. And the two noisy, formless tracks before it, not like it isn't noisy and formless in its own way, build up to this. And you just get this. It is one of the just massive, massive release of just massive catharsis. And the whole damn thing is fantastic otherwise. It isn't just that one song, though it is the highlight. Well, the rest of the thing is pretty damn good as well. Internet Club, redefining the workplace. The most straight up vaporwave album that is the highest, and really the most straight up vaporwave on the whole chart. This is pretty much one of the earliest examples of like ambient vaporwave that is explicitly sort of being ambient music. This thing is fairly cohesive, actually. The whole thing, and well, Internet Club's other stuff from this era tends to be a little more collagey. This one is more ambient building soundscapes, very repetitive, but beautiful in a way that is just. It takes these corporate stock music things and loops them and transfigures them into this just beautiful, just very cohesive. Another one that I put on a lot, another very common listen for me. It's what vaporwave can be, you know? It's like fantastic. One Tricks Point Never, Garden of Delete. This is his album that's sort of about like teenagerhood. That is the basic concept here. It is edgy, it is angsty. Yeah. And it is cathartic. It has a little bit of a backstory. There's an alien Ezra. There's a fake band he made up, which he intentionally made up to have this thing where they'd release the demos from that band that split up and like the main guy died or something. And like there's like Twitter accounts keeping it up. There's like this lore behind this album. But then the album itself is his most consistent work overall. It is definitely his darkest. It is definitely his angstiest. But it does so in a way that is very unique. It's not just straightforwardly angsty. It is abstracted a little bit. It speaks to teenagerhood. After I am not a teenager, this may fall because this is something that speaks to me right now. But still then, the song structures are incredible. Nearly every track here is incredible. They're all pretty different from each other, too. I don't need to say any more. Baby Tunes, Inhale C4. The second highest. So like we have this, which are. This is a James Farrar alias. We have the James Farrar album here. This is a OPN alias. So we have this sort of symmetry here, I guess. I don't know. This is his first foray after Farside Virtual came out. This is literally his first attempt, or like his first public thing of It's under the Baby Tunes alias. It's quite similar to Silica Gel down here. It's a similar idea, repetitive R&B influenced things, lots of autotune, formless, weird, sort of formless, repetitive, weird song structures, weird moments. I mean, like, the cover kind of says, like, what the fuck is going on in this cover, you know? Ahead of its time. The whole Blade, fucking worst name ever. Drain Gang shit is influenced by this, but this is more abstract than that because it's more amateur, it's more raw. That's his thing in general. He's kind of this amateur artist. He's not a professional, but he knows how to get you. He knows how to get your emotions. And he knows how to say shit about shit. Maybe not his earlier stuff. It's kind of formless and conceptless to me. It doesn't really need the concepts. It is what it is, but this as his weird postmodern R&B, weirdly mixed, but just fucking fun as hell. And super emotional, super duper atmospheric. Just another fucking love this thing. Another early one for me, Blink Mass, World Eater. So I, heard of this. Sorry about the cover, by the way. Some people don't like the cover. I've gotten used to it. Where Terror Sport, it's a little harder to describe. You definitely can tell this is the same guy who was part of that group. This is a little darker. This is a little more atmospheric and more experimental and more eclectic. Quite as noisy, though. Quite similar amount of noise. Very industrial. But after the first 2 or 3 tracks, it gets into this loop where pretty much every track has this very strong dance music influence. Very strong. So this is a very fun album, despite it being sort of oppressive and heavy. It's fun, but not in a way many things are. It's a little punkish. It's fun, it's repetitive, it's building. It's this weird mix of things. So it was my favorite album of all time at one point, I do believe. And, yeah, it's still pretty damn good. Very hard to describe, though, beyond basics like that. And my throat is actually starting to hurt now, so we have only 5 left. Autechre, LSEC 1 through 5. This was the first Autechre I heard anything from LSEC 1, Feed 1, first track on this thing, first track on the first track of this. That's what I heard. Fucking weird introduction, because that is a noisy, weird track. I would say that overall NTS is a little less weird. LSEC is a little more weird, but it's shorter. It's probably overall their weirdest album. It's hard to say if this or XI is their darkest album, because this is still dark, but it's in its own way. This probably would be higher if it wasn't for LSEC 4, which is a lot of people's favorites for some reason. It's more accessible, but it just doesn't flow with the rest. Like NTS, I have also heard this in full. The whole 4 hours in one session. There's so much going on here, even though it has like 20-minute tracks. Yeah, it's just indescribable. Peak modern Autechre. And the last Autechre, and my favorite, and not a very common favorite, Choristus. Their album with the shortest tracks and the most amount of tracks, aside from the really long ones. It's only about an hour in length, but it has 20 tracks. Compared to Untilted, which has like 9. Those are all the track titles. It's probably my least favorite cover from them, but the music is great. Another thing, explicitly inspired by dreams, which is a very common thing for me. I really love dreams. I might go take some after this stream. I'm gonna do some timestamps for this later, but I think I might have to just lie down and let my voice heal because I fucked up my voice. But yes, where people think this is sort of the thing that I don't agree with is people think this is messy, that the tracks don't go anywhere. To me, every track sort of leads into the next one. You have the opener Altibs, which is sort of falling asleep, and another one of my favorite ambient songs of all time. Then you have the Polk, which is my least favorite song on the album, actually, but is sort of this rude awakening, and now you're in this fucking weird dreamland. It's a good end to their middle era, where they, and like Elsec, it is built out of, what we think Elsec stands for is edited live sequences, and we're pretty sure this is a pretty similar thing as that because we have the other stuff from the era that they've released that is versions of this album. Yeah, I think it's really consistent. There's ambient-y soundscapes, there's industrial fun tracks, there's tracks that just do weird things. There's a lot. It's very aquatic, as you can tell by the cover. It's very sort of... And it's also, like, based on pretty much their entire discography before. It is the final chunk before they go really insane with Oversteps. Starting with Oversteps, their sound design really levels up there. But still, the songs themselves here make this my favorite one. It's weird as hell. It's not for everyone, but it's for me, and I love it so much. Giant Claw, soft channel. So, this is 1/3 of Death Dynamic Shroud. I'll try living like this. I didn't mention it's the first time all three of them get working. Oh, no. It's actually Heavy Black Heart, but he is one of the ones who works on that. And this is a sound collage album. It is a lot of weird fucking... This is a hard one to describe. Weird samples, fake MIDI things, vaporwave adjacent but not vaporwave. Pretty much defines what his label Orange Milk sounds like. Like, pretty much everything. A lot of things like this, like Seth Graham and other artists, try to do this. I don't know if he was the first to do this, but on this album, he sort of sets the tone for that, even though it's not like the first thing released on the label or anything. It sort of sets the sound for it. And like, there's classical influences, there's like samples from like trailers, samples from pop songs. It's cathartic, it's weird as hell. It's these little pointillistic sounds separated by silence. The first track is more song-like and cathartic, but it really does grow on you a lot, as evidenced by it being my favorite album of all time right now that isn't, like, super fucking obvious. It's hard to describe. I really like it. Sound design goes crazy. Let's go to Echo Jams Volume 1, Chuck Person. The thing that started Vaporwave. Literally the album. And it's better than literally all of it. Like, not even close. It is a little weird that I got into music through Vaporwave, and I'm just like, nah, I don't fucking like Vaporwave. When it's good. Dear Lord. This is noisier than a lot of Vaporwave. It isn't satirical. It is making songs out of other songs. It is looping them up, slowing them down, speeding them up sometimes, and feeding them through a lo-fi cassette sound that's just lovely. Whole thing is cathartic. Takes the hooks of a song, makes that the song, loops them, makes them noisier. Brilliant. So much has been said about it. Any of the sort of shit about it, people say It isn't necessary because it just sounds fucking awesome. Any of the shit people say about vaporwave, it doesn't matter. This shit just sounds fucking awesome. I didn't realize. I heard I gotten into a vaporwave before I heard this, and I thought, okay, this is gonna be just the first vaporwave album. The thing that started it is not going to be that special. How wrong I was. And number 1, James Ferraro's I Asia. Whew, boy. It's a little weird. So, another one of the most important things to the evolution of my music tastes in general. Before this, I had mostly been listening to hi-fi sound design based music, like Soft Channel and Autechre and a lot of this other shit. This is a very lo-fi album. This is just crunchy as shit. It's like his lo-fi era, I think definitely some of it, which is his lo-fi era is everything before Farside Virtual. His hi-fi era is everything after Farside Virtual, and Farside Virtual is sort of the bridge that connects them and has him thinking about social issues and shit more. But yeah. Hi Asia. Pretty much all my top 10 just get hard to describe because I like abstract music. This is abstract music, but to a point, it's not the most abstract music ever made. There's song structures here, especially compared to his lo-fi work in general. There's songs here. They're a little jammy, they're a little loose, but they're songs. One thing I should say is the iAsia with an @ sign that is on his Bandcamp now. As with a lot of stuff on his Bandcamp, you probably shouldn't listen to it because it is slightly abridged or very abridged compared to the actual versions, and the mixing is a little different, and the mixing on this is basically perfect. I wouldn't change a thing about it. Even though it's lo-fi as hell, it is noisy. I find this abstract in a way that it is literally incompatible with reality. I have to lie down and just think about it alone for it to make sense. It does not feel like it exists in this reality. It also bangs. So, yeah, it's my favorite album of all time. I don't even know where to begin. It is James Ferraro personized in every single way. Even though he would go on to do his R&B shit, and then he does all his modern MIDI shit. This is a peak. And it's funny that the only other lo-fi thing on this chart, even though I've heard quite a bit of it, is this guy. It's weird, all this other shit, his stuff's so fantastic, but doesn't quite get onto the chart. It's weird. Yeah. Anyway, I'm done. My throat. I'm going to have a sore throat for the rest of the day and maybe the rest of the week. This was not a good idea. Man, I hope I'm still streaming. Let's go check that out. I hope this is still live because I'm gonna be sad. I hope this is still live because I'm gonna be sad. Hell yeah. Awesome. Okay. That's the stream. That's my whole topster. I ruined my voice. Goodbye. I'll do some timestamps on this later for this to be easier to navigate, but for now, goodbye. This is a horrible idea. I did not realize